Hello everyone, and welcome back to Mr. Night Fear. I know many of you listen to these stories to help you fall asleep. So, before you get settled in, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from. And if you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's get comfortable, relax, and begin. I'm originally from upstate Pennsylvania. When I was in my early 20s, I lived about 40 minutes outside Scranton. I had just come out of a 2-year relationship and wasn't really sure who I was anymore. It was one of those in-between phases of life. You know the kind, when you're a little lost, floating through days, trying to find meaning without realizing you're even searching. My grandma, Evelyn, was deeply spiritual. Old school, the type who still lit candles for the saints and kept holy water in a glass bottle by her bed. After my grandpa passed away, I started going to Sunday service with her. I guess part of me wanted to be there for her. Another part of me just needed some kind of anchor. My grandpa had served in Vietnam. Everyone in our county respected him. Losing him broke something in her. But despite the grief, her faith never cracked. She used to tell me, "He's with the Lord now. He's at peace." I could tell she believed it deep down in her bones. I envied that kind of peace. You don't see it often, not the real kind. One Sunday, after service, something strange happened. Something that still doesn't feel fully real. It's like remembering a dream that left a scar. That morning, I saw a girl I didn't recognize. Which was weird, because the congregation was small, and new faces stood out. She stood near the old stained glass window, sunlight catching in her dark curls. Her eyes were this hazel green color, warm but distant. I noticed her watching the pastor, head tilted slightly like she was studying him. When the service ended, I made my way over. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way she stood so still, like she didn't quite belong there. Or maybe it was just her. She introduced herself as Rachel. There was something quietly magnetic about her. She didn't smile wide or laugh loud, but her voice had this softness that drew me in. We started talking casually. I asked where she was from. She teased, said I'd have to earn that kind of information over coffee. I liked the way she played it cool. Eventually, she told me she and her mom had just moved to a town about 20 minutes away. She was a transfer student at a small college up north. That explained why I hadn't seen her before. I got her number, and we started texting not long after. We shared music, memes, even a few voice notes. It felt good. Familiar. Easy. But there were odd things too. Like how little she posted on social media. Her Instagram had barely any followers or photos. And when I asked about her family, her answers came slow and guarded. She eventually told me her stepdad had been abusive. Her mom had done what she could to protect her, but it wasn't enough. They'd had to leave fast. Her real dad? That part she kept vague. Just said he wasn't someone you wanted to know. That he used to show up in places he shouldn't have. And that one day, they just left it all behind. I didn't press. Sometimes, you can feel when someone's offering you all they can. And I respected that. We hadn't even planned a proper date yet, but I figured I'd see her again at church. Sure enough, next Sunday she was there, standing alone again, same spot by the stained glass window. I waited until after service and asked her out. She said yes right away. No hesitation. That whole week, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I even skipped out on a poker night with my buddies just to get some sleep before our date. I wanted to be fully present. When Friday came, we kept it simple. Dinner and a movie. Nothing fancy. Just a chance to talk, laugh, and not be around too many people. She was funny, sharper than I expected. The kind of person who noticed everything but rarely said it out loud unless it mattered. There were long pauses between topics, but they never felt awkward. Just thoughtful. After dinner, I suggested a drive. Just a peaceful ride to nowhere, windows down, radio low. She nodded and said, "I like that." We drove east on Route 118, a stretch of road lined with woods and open fields. No lights. Just the occasional mailbox or rusted barn peeking out from the trees. The sky was that deep navy blue where stars hadn't fully come out yet. I remember thinking, this feels perfect. But it didn't stay that way. About 20 minutes into the drive, Rachel said something. But it wasn't in English. It sounded almost like Latin or maybe Old French. I couldn't place it. Her voice had dropped to a whisper, but the cadence was fast, like a chant. I laughed, thinking she was pulling a prank. But then I looked at her face. Her eyes were rolled back, pure white. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle, lips moving too quickly for any real words. I swerved so hard I nearly crashed into the guardrail. My pulse was racing. I pulled over fast, heart pounding in my chest like it wanted out. She was still speaking, low and urgent. Her face twitched. Her hands stayed limp in her lap. It felt like time slowed down. I didn't know if she was having a seizure, a breakdown, or something worse. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called 911. Told them someone in my car was in medical distress. The dispatcher kept asking if she was breathing, if she was responsive. I didn't know how to answer. She wasn't gone, but she wasn't there either. Her voice never stopped. It was like it didn't belong to her. It filled the car in a way I can't explain, like it was bouncing off the inside of my skull. Then, just like that, it ended. Her eyes fluttered back to normal. Her mouth closed. The car fell silent. She looked at me and asked, "Why are we stopped?" She snapped her head toward me and slammed her mouth shut. Her eyes blinked, then slowly shifted back to normal, but the look she gave me? Wild. Wide-eyed. Unsettling. I'll carry that image with me for the rest of my life. Before I could even get a word out, she flung open the passenger door and bolted, full sprint, into the forest. Not a jog. Not a panic shuffle. She ran into the dark woods like something was chasing her. I was frozen. Just stuck. My mind raced to process what I'd seen, but my body wouldn't move. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel, and my pulse was a blur in my ears. I don't remember how long I sat like that. Eventually, the flashing red and blue lights snapped me out of it. The cops and paramedics arrived. I told them everything, even the parts that sounded completely insane. I described her eyes, the way she changed, the way she ran. They didn't laugh. They didn't roll their eyes. They wrote everything down and said they'd do what they could. I probably looked like a crazy person, but they still treated it seriously. At least, outwardly. After that night, she was just gone. Vanished. I never saw her again. I looked for her every Sunday at church. Nothing. I checked her Instagram, it was gone. Tried texting her, blocked. I asked a buddy to text her too. Her number had been wiped completely, like it never existed. I even asked around at church. Described her. Her hair, her voice, her smile. No one recognized her. Not one person. It was like she had never been there in the first place. I moved out of that town eventually. Too many memories. Too much weirdness. Still, there's this one last thread that ties me back to that place, my parents' old 2012 Ford Escape. That thing should have died 5 years ago, but somehow, it keeps running. It's got more problems than I can list. The brakes are soft, the engine stalls for no reason, and the electronics go haywire if you sneeze too hard. The worst part? The windshield wipers are shot. Like, totally useless. Driving in the rain might as well be driving blindfolded. But hey, I live in Arizona now, rain's rare, right? At least that's what my elementary school teachers used to say when they gave out weather trivia. Anyway, this was a couple summers ago. I'd taken a solo road trip out to visit my old friend Calvin over in New Mexico. We hadn't seen each other in years. It felt good to reconnect. The drive there was a dream. Long highways, empty roads, open sky. I stayed at his place for a few days. We drank too much, stayed up too late, and laughed like we were teenagers again. The drive back was easy at first. But as I crossed into the northern Arizona desert, things changed. Fast. Out of nowhere, a monster storm rolled in. Not just drizzle or light rain, a real storm. Crashing thunder. Lightning that lit up the mountains. Wind that rocked the car. It turned out to be one of the worst downpours in years. But with my busted wipers, any rain was a problem. This was a death trap. I had no choice. I pulled off the highway onto a gravel patch way out in the desert, hoping no truck would come barreling through and miss me in the dark. The plan? Wait it out. I thought about calling roadside assistance, but I was broke and couldn't risk a citation. Plus, let's be real, there was no way I was asking my 60-something parents to drive 4 hours to come get me. So I waited. Alone. Miles from anything. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, and the storm just wouldn't stop. No headlights passed me. No sounds but the rain hammering the roof and the occasional deep rumble of thunder. After an hour, the silence started getting to me. I don't scare easy. But I grew up on desert ghost stories, skinwalkers, lost travelers, phantom lights, and sitting alone out there. It all started creeping in. Something felt off. Like I wasn't alone. I kept looking out the windows. Left. Right. Rear view. Nothing. Just the occasional flash of lightning revealing rocky terrain and scrub brush. The sun began to sink behind the hills, painting the sky in that haunting, dusty orange glow only the desert can pull off. Normally I'd take a picture or sit and admire it, but not that day. That day, it felt wrong. Twilight turned to darkness, and the rain finally started to ease. I took that as a sign. Maybe I could get back on the road. But the windshield was still blurry, streaked with water I couldn't wipe away. I stayed parked. No point crashing a mile from nowhere. To distract myself, I watched the lightning in the distance. There was a rhythm to it, almost comforting. But then a bolt flashed close, bright enough to light up everything around me, and I could swear, just for a second, something moved. Out by the rocks. I sat upright. Stared. Waited for the next flash. Nothing. I tried to shake the feeling. Told myself it was just shadows playing tricks. Maybe my imagination. Maybe exhaustion. I'd barely slept at Calvin's. Still, I locked the doors. That made me feel a little better. By then it was pitch black. The wind rattled the windows, and the air felt heavier somehow. Thicker. Like something was waiting. I knew I wouldn't be driving anywhere. I reclined the seat, pulled my hoodie over my face, and decided to get some sleep. But just before I drifted off, I heard something. Tap. 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 It was faint. Like fingertips. Right outside the driver's side window. I was just about to close my eyes when I noticed quick flashes cutting through the darkness ahead. It wasn't lightning. These were sharp, jittery bursts of bright white light, like someone flicking a flashlight around in a panic. At first, I thought it might be reflections or maybe cars on a distant road. But they moved strangely, too fast, too random. Almost like they were dancing. Then it hit me. They were getting closer. I could feel the sweat forming on my palms. My throat tightened. Something deep inside told me I shouldn't be seen. Without really thinking, I grabbed my phone and slipped out of the car. I darted across the wet gravel and crouched behind a large boulder near the edge of the trail. Rain was still falling in a soft drizzle, but I barely felt it. My heart was pounding so hard I was scared it would give me away. I stayed low, barely breathing, peeking just enough to keep my car in view. And then I saw them. 3 figures moving slowly toward the vehicle. Each one held a flashlight, but the way they moved, it wasn't right. They weren't just walking, they staggered, weaving their lights in erratic circles, as if they were confused or high on something. They surrounded the car, shining their beams into the windows, leaning in close like they were trying to see who or what was inside. I squinted hard, trying to make out any faces, but it was too dark. Their movements were jagged, almost theatrical. And then out of nowhere, one of them raised a hand and fired a gunshot straight into the air. I flinched so hard I bit down on my lip, hard enough to draw blood. My instincts screamed at me to stay put. I tucked myself tighter against the rock, trying to disappear. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was longer. It felt endless. I finally worked up the nerve to glance around the edge again. The lights were gone. My car sat in total darkness, alone on that empty trail. I held my breath. And just when I thought it was over, bam, the flashlights came back. Spinning again, whipping around my car like they were mocking me. I knew I had to do something. My hand shook as I pulled out my phone and called 911. I whispered everything I could get out, where I was, what I saw, what I heard. The dispatcher told me to stay hidden and that help was on the way. It felt like a lifetime passed before I finally spotted the red and blue flicker of police lights cutting through the fog in the distance. As soon as the cruiser came into view, the figures took off. They bolted into the woods, no hesitation, no sound, just gone. I ran out from behind the boulder, waving both arms. I didn't care how ridiculous I looked. I was just relieved someone finally showed up. The officer didn't seem particularly surprised by what I told him, which somehow made it feel worse. He stayed with me until the storm passed and even helped jumpstart my car. I guess that was something. But I never drove that road again. I still think about that night a lot. But what I'm about to tell you next, it's the part that truly never left me. My name's Mary Jensen. A few months back, my best friend Carolyn and I were driving up from a visit in Florida. We had taken a little break from our jobs and responsibilities to catch up with friends from college down in Tampa. It had been a good trip, lots of sun, too much food, and even more laughter. But eventually, life called us back. The plan was to knock out the entire drive back to Pennsylvania in one shot. We loaded the car with snacks, cold brew, and a playlist we'd made back in sophomore year. It was meant to be fun. Just 2 old friends reliving memories and getting some quality time. By the time the sun started rising, though, my lower back was killing me. I told Carolyn we needed to stop any stop. Maybe grab some gas, stretch, find a decent breakfast burrito if we were lucky. We passed a couple exits, but one sign finally caught our eye. It claimed to lead to a town called Mill Creek Falls, boasting quaint local shops and historic downtown attractions. Sounded perfect. But the second we rolled off the highway, something felt off. The road was cracked. The welcome sign was half covered in ivy. And the air, I swear, it felt heavier somehow. Like that sensation before a storm hits, but there weren't any clouds in the sky. As we drove further in, we noticed something strange. The town didn't look abandoned, exactly. More like, paused. As if someone had hit a button and time just froze. The storefronts still had signs. One had balloons faded from sun and age tied to the door. But there were no people. No movement. Not even a squirrel. It gave me the chills. Carolyn said I was being dramatic, but even she started looking uneasy when we pulled into a convenience store parking lot and didn't see a single other car around. Still, we needed a break. We stretched out, brushed the crumbs off our shirts, and stepped inside. To our surprise, it looked normal: bright lights, coolers humming, shelves stocked. It even smelled faintly like cinnamon, which was oddly comforting. Carolyn went off searching for her favorite iced tea and came back huffing. They didn't have it. She rolled her eyes, muttered about this being a waste of time, and insisted we try somewhere else. Carolyn has always been a bit extra, so I humored her. We got back in the car, and I figured we'd drive a bit further into town to look for a diner or gas station. But deep down, something told me we should have just stayed on the interstate. And that's when things started to get weirder. I still wanted my Gatorade, so I grabbed a bottle and walked up to the counter. The cashier was a woman, maybe early 30s. She had dark brown hair and was unusually tall. Everything about her seemed normal, friendly, casual, but I remember her so clearly because she was wearing suspenders. I don't see many people wearing those anymore. It stuck in my mind. I paid and stepped outside with Emily. She pointed to another gas station across the street, figuring we might have better luck there. We crossed over, and the second we stepped inside, my stomach turned. The woman at the register looked exactly like the cashier from the first store. Same hair. Same height. Same face. I just stood there, frozen. The longer I stared, the more uncomfortable she got. Eventually, I blurted out, "Hey, do you have a twin?" She gave me a weird look. Kind of suspicious. "No," she said, "I'm an only child." The way she said it gave me chills. Like she thought I was the strange one. I tried to explain what I meant, about seeing someone who looked just like her at the other gas station. But she just shook her head and looked away. Emily tugged on my arm, and I backed out of the store, still staring. Outside, I tried to tell her what just happened. She said she didn't really remember what the first cashier looked like and that I was probably just exhausted from the road trip. But I knew what I saw. To prove it, we walked back to the first gas station. But when we got there, everything changed. The woman behind the counter wasn't the same. Not even close. She was short, maybe in her late 40s, with light blonde hair. There was no way anyone could confuse her with the woman I'd seen earlier. She looked at me like I was lost. I couldn't even find the words to explain it. Emily just said, "Let it go," and honestly, I wanted to. But we still needed gas. We pulled into the next station we saw. It was one of those old-school ones you barely notice unless you're out of options. The place was completely empty, no cars, no noise, no lights except for a flickering one over the pump. We got out, walked to the store. Emily wandered off to check for her favorite iced tea. Of course, they didn't have it. I paid, waited, and we headed back to the car. We couldn't have been inside for more than a minute. But when we stepped out, the parking lot was packed. Every single pump was taken. Cars were lined up, headlights glowing. There were even people outside their vehicles, talking, pacing, staring. Just staring. It felt like everyone there had turned to watch us. I could feel their eyes. My skin prickled. Emily froze, too. This time she didn't try to reason it away. It was like the world had changed while we weren't looking. Like reality blinked and forgot to reset. We didn't say a word. Just got in the car and took off. Food didn't matter anymore. We found the on-ramp and merged back onto the highway. The silence between us felt thick. I wasn't scared, at least, not in the traditional sense, but my stomach was in knots. Then we started talking about it. Not much, just processing what we'd seen. That's when the minivan passed us. It was a Toyota Sienna. Silver. The windshield had a spiderweb crack across the driver's side, and the rear passenger door had deep scratches. Emily made a joke about how beat up it looked. I smiled. 10 minutes later, the same van passed us again. Same crack. Same scratches. Same license plate. We were both sure of it. But that didn't make sense. We'd been driving straight, no exits, no detours. There was no way that van could have circled back and passed us again. Emily started repeating "Oh my God" under her breath. Her voice cracked. I pressed harder on the gas, trying to calm her while keeping my eyes on the road. Inside, I was falling apart. I glanced down at the GPS. It said we'd been driving for an hour. No way. We hadn't even gone 30 miles. I wanted to tell Emily, but she already looked like she was barely holding it together. So I just kept driving. The sky looked different now, too. Like the moon had shifted or something. We finally hit the interstate again, and everything felt normal. Sort of. Hours later, we pulled into the driveway like waking up from a dream. That whole stretch, those stores, the van, the people at the pumps, it doesn't feel real anymore. Every time I think about it, my mind blanks out the edges. When I tell people, they look at me sideways. Like I made it up, or like I'm just trying to sound spooky. But I know what I felt. And I never want to feel it again. That cold drop in your gut. The electric stillness in the air. Like something's watching you from just outside the light. If you've ever felt that, you know. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Back when I was in college, I used to house sit for a retired couple every summer when they'd head to Europe for a few weeks. They lived in a quiet little town called Pine Hollow, one of those places with white picket fences and neighbors who wave even if they don't know you. I had a handful of creepy moments while watching their place, but the story I'm about to share was the one that finally made me quit for good. I was in my early 20s, juggling part-time work and night classes. House sitting was one of the many ways I kept myself afloat. The couple would leave for about 2 weeks, completely off the grid, no phone signal, no email. If anything went wrong, I had emergency contacts and the local sheriff's number pinned to the fridge. Now, I'd already had some eerie moments in that house, lights flickering, footsteps upstairs when no one was home, but they paid me well, and I needed the money. At the time, I worked at a local animal rescue center. I knew my way around pets, especially cats. This couple had 4 of them, quiet, low maintenance, and pretty chill. The first few days were smooth. I stayed in their guest room, made my way to campus by foot, no need to worry about gas or parking tickets. A few nights in, my boyfriend, Jake, came over to bring dinner and hang out. He knew I got nervous in the house alone, especially at night. We ate in the guest room and watched some TV. Around midnight, Jake stood up and grabbed his keys. "I don't know why, but I've got a weird feeling tonight," he said, looking around the room like something was off. "I think I need to sleep at home." "Seriously?" I asked. "You've stayed here before." He nodded but didn't smile. "I know. But it just feels different tonight. I don't know. Something's off. I didn't want to go home." My relationship with my parents was strained at best. My older sister, who had been my rock, had already moved out a year earlier. That house never felt like home anymore, especially without her. So, I told Jake I'd be fine. The neighborhood was safe, the alarm system worked, and I had 4 furry companions downstairs to keep me company. Jake lingered a moment longer. "Lock the doors. Set the alarm. Just text me if anything weird happens." He left, and I did what I always did to check all the windows and doors, made sure everything was locked up, turned on the alarm, and got ready for bed. I hadn't even pulled the covers up when the TV flicked on by itself. I sat up, confused. The remote was on the nightstand, untouched. Maybe I rolled over it? I turned it off. A few seconds later, it turned on again, this time showing only static, a black and white screen buzzing quietly. No menu, no welcome screen. Just that blank signal. I turned it off. It came back on. Again and again. I unplugged the damn thing. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a glitch. The house had just been remodeled, and sometimes new wiring did weird things. Still, that had never happened before. I grabbed a blanket and headed for the couch in the living room, leaving the creepy static behind. The next morning, Jake came back with coffee. I told him what had happened. He looked at me like he was holding back a big "I told you so." "That house has always felt off," he said. "You really should have just come home with me." I shrugged it off. I didn't love the idea of another night in the house, but it still beat going back to the tension waiting for me at my parents' place. That night, Jake stayed over again. We ate leftovers, curled up in the living room, and put on a movie. But before I go on, I should probably explain the house layout. The main floor was ground level. You'd walk in through the front door and land straight into the living room. But the basement was finished and oddly nicer than upstairs, with another big living area and a guest room. The staircase to the basement, though, was steep and creaky as hell. I always found it strange that they didn't fix it during their big renovation. The cats were typical in that cozy, aloof way. They liked being around you but didn't want to be touched. They'd sprawl near your feet or nap in the hallway, just far enough away to pretend they didn't care. Out of the four, the youngest was a playful tabby named Toby, barely 3 years old, always darting around like he had somewhere to be. That night, we were halfway through the movie when I heard something that made my blood run cold. It sounded like a baby crying, from the basement. Jake muted the TV. We sat there frozen. He turned to me slowly, his face pale, silently asking if I heard it too. I nodded. Now, from working at the shelter, I knew that cats sometimes made noises that could sound like a baby's cry, especially when they were stuck or scared. I looked around and counted 3 cats lounging nearby. Toby was missing. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way toward the basement. Every step down those old wooden stairs groaned under my weight. The crying got louder. At the bottom, I found the spare room door slightly ajar. Toby was inside, pacing in circles, tail puffed up, clearly agitated. He bolted out as soon as he saw me. I shut the door and stood there a moment, trying to catch my breath. I told myself it was just the cat. That maybe he wandered in and the door closed behind him. Maybe the sound echoed weird off the walls. Maybe I was just tired. But part of me knew in my gut that Toby wasn't just crying. Something else had spooked him down there. And whatever it was, it didn't feel like it wanted to be alone. It all started when the basement door somehow shut behind him. He was stuck in there alone. I carried him up the stairs, trying to laugh it off, and we went back to watching our movie. Halfway through, we hit pause. It was time to feed the cats. The homeowners were strict about their feeding schedule. The cat food station was in the kitchen, and the kitchen happened to be the only room that connected to the basement. To picture the house, the front door opened into the living room, which branched off into 2 paths. One led to the kitchen, and the other led to a hallway with 3 bedrooms, a spare room, the master bedroom, and a kid's bedroom that clearly belonged to their teenage son. The kitchen wrapped around and circled back into the living room, forming a kind of loop. That kitchen door was also the only way down to the basement. These cats were creatures of habit. They wanted nothing to do with people while they ate, or right after, they'd vanish to nap with full bellies. Usually, they curled up in the master bedroom or the kids' room. I'd been watching them for years. This was nothing new. So when we didn't see any cats after dinner, it didn't strike me as weird at first. We were still sitting at the kitchen table when we heard it again. Crying. From the basement. This time, louder, probably because we were closer to the basement door. I scanned the kitchen. No cats. I didn't think to check the living room. I was already getting nervous. My boyfriend looked uneasy too. I told him I'd check it out. I was trying to be brave, assuming it was just one of the cats again. But the cries sounded different this time, more frequent, higher pitched. I flicked on the basement light and slowly crept down the steps, calling the cat's name. Each step made the crying louder. But when I hit the bottom, silence. I checked the spare storage room. Nothing. Peeked behind boxes, under the old couch. No cat. No movement. Just empty, stale air. My chest tightened, and my heart pounded so hard I felt it in my ears. I don't run. I don't even jog. But I sprinted up those stairs like something was chasing me. Back in the kitchen, I froze. My boyfriend was standing stiff as a board, pale as a ghost. Surrounding him, all 4 cats. Every single one of them. He said they all had wandered out of the bedroom hallway just moments after I disappeared into the basement. That's when I knew no cat had ever been downstairs. I didn't say a word. I grabbed my bag, shoved everything in without even folding it, and we got out of there. I didn't sleep much that night. For the rest of the week, I only returned during the day. I'd run in, clean the litter box, dump some food in their bowls, and leave. I ignored the schedule. I didn't care anymore. On the last day, I locked up, dropped the house key in their usual hiding spot, sent a quick thanks text, and let them know I wouldn't be doing this again. Ever. That house gave me the creeps. And looking back, each year I watched those cats, it always felt a little weirder than the last. I should have stopped long before. I still remember calling my sister on the drive to my parents' house that night. I needed to talk to someone. That's when she admitted something I didn't expect. She'd had her own creepy experience in that house. She never told me. She didn't want to scare me. She knew I needed the money. But she had stayed quiet, until now. My name's Kelsey. I was 17 at the time. I'm 5 feet 3 inches. My friend Haley's about 5 feet 8 inches, and Sammy's 5 feet 7 inches. It was March 19, 2016. I was dog-sitting at my mom's friend's place in a small town near Pine Hollow, Indiana. I needed the extra cash to stash away before heading off to college. The house was pretty cool, especially the sunroom, big windows, cozy vibe. My friends and I liked to hang out there and chill. That night, I invited Haley and Sammy over to keep me company. Made the whole babysitting a dog thing feel less like work. Haley was 23, Sammy was 22. They brought vodka. We spent hours drinking, laughing, and catching up. Willis, the dog, was curled up on the rug. Everything felt fine. Normal. Then the phone rang. Weird, since the landline wasn't supposed to be working. But we ignored it. No voicemail. No caller ID. Just more ringing. Call after call. No messages. No one saying who they were. Eventually, Sammy picked up. A man's voice. He said he had the homeowner's wallet. Claimed he found it at a gas station almost 30 minutes away. He kept repeating that it was urgent. That we needed to come get it now. We all looked at each other, confused. Why would someone have the wallet? And why call us instead of the owner? Sammy tried to tell him we weren't going anywhere. He didn't like that. He kept insisting. Eventually, she hung up. Something about that call didn't sit right. It didn't feel like some good Samaritan. It felt off. Wrong. We got scared. Really scared. We grabbed Willis and bolted to the back bedroom. Locked the door. Closed all the blinds. Sat in the dark, barely breathing. Something about that voice on the phone still echoes in my head sometimes. What was he trying to do? Why did he know where we were? And why did that disconnected phone keep ringing? You know how weed and alcohol mess with your head, right? We were already a bit hazy from both. After talking things over, we convinced ourselves we were just being paranoid. The guy on the phone probably just wanted to make sure the wallet got back to its owner. Nothing sinister. We smoked some more, had a couple of drinks, then put on a comedy to chill out and made some late-night snacks to wind down. We moved from the enclosed porch to the living room. This porch sat between the kitchen and the living room, with a door leading out to the backyard and pool area. That backyard door didn't have a lock, but the one connecting the porch to the rest of the house stayed open so our friend's dog, Max, could go outside to do his business. Despite the weird phone call earlier, we felt safe. The house was in a quiet part of Maple Ridge, the kind of suburban town where people leave their doors unlocked. And Max would bark his head off if anyone came close. So, we let our guard down. Time passed. We lounged around, laughing on the couches. I was next to Haley on one sofa, and Sammy was sprawled out on the other. Then the clock hit 3 a.m., that eerie hour everyone jokes about, but nobody really laughs when it rolls around. Remember how we left the porch door open for Max? That's where he came in from. I was caught up in the movie when suddenly, I got that creeping sensation like eyes on the back of my neck. It hit me like a wave. I turned toward the kitchen. There was a figure. Hunched. Dark. Silent. At first, I thought I was imagining it, just shadows playing tricks on me. But then I saw it reach up to the cabinet. That's when I knew someone was in the house. I pressed my elbow into Haley and whispered, "Haley, I think there's someone here." She glanced toward the kitchen and screamed. The shadow jerked its head toward us. My entire body went rigid. We locked eyes, and all I could see were these icy blue eyes glowing in the soft light from a night lamp under the cabinet. Everything else, his hoodie, jeans, gloves, blended into darkness. He even wore a ski mask that covered his nose and mouth. Sammy stood up to get a better look, then shouted something I don't even remember. The man calmly shut the cabinet door, turned, and walked out the porch door without rushing. We bolted to the far corner of the room, grabbing our phones. Max didn't bark once. We called 911, voices shaking. The police showed up within minutes, searched the house, took our statements, and then parked outside for the rest of the night in case he came back. We didn't wait around. We left everything, our drinks, the weed, even my car and Max, behind with the cops and went home. The next day, we returned. Clothes had been moved, some thrown on the floor. Crumbs were scattered near the doggy door. That made sense, whoever it was must have been sneaking in and out more than once, and they probably fed Max to keep him quiet. To this day, we don't know who made that phone call, or who walked through the kitchen like they belonged there. I've never gone back to that house. I'm 28 now. I've always loved animals, dogs, cats, you name it. That love led me to work as a veterinary assistant. For a while, I also offered weekend pet sitting for people going out of town. I watched all kinds of animals, cats, dogs, even birds. I stayed over when folks didn't have family nearby. I guess being a woman who worked at an animal hospital made people feel like they could trust me. I wasn't just a stranger off Craigslist, my name and credentials were public online. One day, I got a message from a man named Jeremy. He needed someone to watch his macaw and his cat while he went away for a weekend. He offered $300, which was reasonable. I'd worked with birds before, even macaws, but this would be my first time staying alone with one for a few days. Jeremy's house sat on a quiet corner in a suburb just outside Cedar Falls. It was a normal-looking place, white siding, tidy lawn, the kind of house you'd never expect to be tied to anything unusual. Jeremy himself looked to be in his late 50s. Short, gray hair, matching mustache. Friendly. Polite. The kind of guy who smiled easily and loved his pets. First, I met Ringo, the macaw. He was massive. I'd handled big birds before, so I wasn't intimidated, and I think that's partly why Jeremy picked me. Ringo kept saying, "Daddy's home," every time Jeremy walked into the room. Jeremy just chuckled and said it was one of his habits. The bird also knew a few other short phrases, 2 or 3 words at a time. Jeremy showed me how to clean Ringo's cage, how to handle him, and how to calm him if he got too noisy. Then he introduced me to the cat, Casper. Quiet, older, mostly stayed in his favorite windowsill. Easy to care for. He walked me through the feeding schedule and showed me the guest room where I'd be staying. One thing he asked was that I not go into any of the other bedrooms upstairs. Just the guest room. Honestly, that felt fair. I was there to watch the animals, not snoop. But something about that house didn't sit right with me. Let me tell you what happened when I agreed to house sit in a quiet town called Pine Hollow, Oregon. There was a bathroom upstairs right next to the guest bedroom, and the owner, Jeremy, said I could help myself to anything in the fridge. But I'm vegan, so I'd already packed my own food for the weekend. He was friendly enough, and after chatting a while, he handed me the house key and left. I stood by the front window and watched as his pickup disappeared down the gravel road, the taillights flickering red through the trees. And just like that, I was alone with his 2 pets, a large African gray parrot named Ringo, and a quiet tabby cat named Casper. It was already late, around 8 p.m., and the woods outside were pitch black. The kind of black where even porch lights just dissolve into nothing. Casper had already eaten, and Jeremy had left enough food in Ringo's cage to last the night. The bird's cage sat smack in the center of the living room, right next to the TV. I flipped on a rerun of The Twilight Zone, grabbed my small dinner from the kitchen, and curled up on the couch. Casper had disappeared somewhere, probably under a bed or behind the sofa. Meanwhile, Ringo just sat on his perch, staring straight at me like he was trying to figure out what kind of person I was. After a couple of episodes and a full belly, I headed up to bed. I didn't see much reason to stay up any longer. I left the bedroom door open. The house was too quiet to feel safe behind a closed one. I woke sometime in the middle of the night to 2 loud cracking sounds. That's really the only way I can describe them, like something heavy shifting or snapping. I sat up in bed and listened. Nothing. So I laid back down and told myself not to overthink it. There was a giant bird downstairs. Maybe he'd just knocked over something in the cage. The next day was peaceful. I scooped Casper's litter box, gave him breakfast, and made sure Ringo was fed too. Later, I opened the cage so Ringo could stretch his wings and walk around a bit. He perched on the back of the couch as I watched a baking competition show. Jeremy had told me the 2 pets mostly ignored each other, and sure enough, they acted like roommates on opposite shifts. By late afternoon, I decided to get out of the house and explore. Pine Hollow had a beautiful park with big pines and mist rolling over the trails. I FaceTimed a couple of friends, grabbed dinner at a vegan place in town, and drove back to the house as the sun dipped behind the treetops. It was just past 7 p.m. when I got in. I spent some time with the animals again, ate my takeout on the couch, and called it an early night, just like the night before. And again, I left the bedroom door open. But this time, I woke up to the distinct sound of the bedroom door closing. I looked up. The door was shut. I froze. The windows were open, sure, but there was no wind. The trees outside were still. I couldn't even hear the usual creaking of the old beams anymore. Then I heard something from downstairs. It sounded like Ringo rustling around in his cage and talking. I threw off the covers and tiptoed out. On the staircase, his voice became clearer. It wasn't just random sounds, he was mimicking someone's voice. Talking. Low and deliberate. When I reached the cage, Ringo was pacing back and forth, feathers puffed slightly. He looked agitated but alert. I remembered Jeremy had told me to give him a certain treat to calm him down. I dug into the bag beside the cage, and that's when he said it. "Daddy's home." My hand froze mid-reach. There was something about the way he said it, not playful. Not casual. Just off. I gave him the treat anyway. He grabbed it with his beak and settled down, going quiet again. But the back of my neck stayed cold. I went back upstairs and left the door open. But about an hour later, I shot awake again. I don't know what woke me. No sound this time. I sat up slowly, and in the dim moonlight filtering through the window, I saw something. A black shape, tall, hunched, moving away from my bed in toward the door. No footsteps, no breathing, just a shifting massive shadow. My throat clenched. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The shape slipped out the door. I grabbed my phone to turn on the flashlight, and that's when I saw the screen lit up with a message. It was from Jeremy. Time-stamped about an hour earlier. Hey, if Ringo gets noisy during the night, it's normal. Just ignore him. I stared at that text. Reread it. Again. And again. The timing. The message. It didn't feel right. That black shape, was it real? Or just my mind playing tricks in the dark? My heart raced. I turned on the lamp, tossed my things into my backpack, and decided to leave right then. I didn't pack much, so it didn't take long. I went into the bathroom next to grab my toothbrush and face wash. When I stepped back out into the upstairs hallway, it hit me, everything was silent. But not empty. Down the hall, one of the bedroom doors was slightly ajar. And I swear, I heard a sound. Faint. A soft, rhythmic creaking. Like a bed rocking gently. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I crept toward the door, toward what I guessed was the master bedroom, and pressed my ear against it. Creak. 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 Someone was in there. That sick feeling tightened in my chest. I knocked hard and said, "Jeremy? Are you in there?" The sound stopped instantly. Total silence. I waited. Nothing. I tried again. "If you're in the house, I need to know before I leave." Still nothing. I backed away, trembling, then ran down the stairs, left the house, and tossed the key onto the entryway table without even looking back. I didn't stop driving until I was halfway home. While still on the road, I recorded a voice message and sent it to Jeremy. I didn't sugarcoat it. I said I felt violated, that I believed someone had been in the house with me, and that I was considering reporting the situation to the police. He called me 3 times back to back. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Eventually, he texted. "Sorry. My brother came home unexpectedly last night. I should have told you. Total garbage." I replied with one line, "Send my payment. I won't press charges." He paid me through Zelle that night. That was the end of it. Except it wasn't. The next day, when I unpacked, I realized a certain article of clothing was missing. Something personal. Something I know I had packed. And I know it was taken. I've never told this story out loud. And honestly, I don't want to again. Even now, thinking about that night, I still wonder. Was it just him in that room? Or something else entirely? And if I hadn't left, what would have happened next? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. If you're anything like me, you hate getting bombarded by pop-ups and ads every time you open a website. Sure, there are tons of ad blockers out there, but the one I've been using lately is pie.org, and it's actually way better than anything I've tried before. It wipes out those frustrating cookie pop-ups and targeted ads based on what you've been Googling, stuff that honestly just creeps me out. And my favorite part? Visual mode. It literally shows you the ads disappearing off the screen, so you can see the clutter vanishing in real time. Even cooler is their rewards program. If you enable it, you can actually earn cash back for viewing approved ads and even when shopping through special pie deals. It's a win-win. So for a smoother, cleaner browsing experience, head over to pie.org/Mr. Nightmare, click Add to Chrome, and follow the simple steps. Don't forget to also add the Pi Shopping Companion extension for even more coupons and cashback perks. When I was around 10 years old, my dad landed a big promotion that changed everything. We packed up our lives in a tiny rural town in upstate New York and moved to a place called Maple Hollow, a quiet, upscale suburb in Vermont. Saying we moved doesn't even cover it. My parents were ecstatic. In less than a month, we went from a cramped little house with creaky floors to a huge colonial-style home tucked between whispering pines. It was the kind of house you'd see in a holiday movie. A fresh start. I was an introverted kid. No close friends, never really fit in. So I didn't mind leaving. Looking back, my parents probably saw this as their chance to give me a better life, a clean slate. And honestly, I didn't resist. The adjustment wasn't hard. Not when you're suddenly living in a house with 2 staircases, a finished attic, and more space than we knew what to do with. We weren't scraping by anymore. I could feel that even at 10. I won't bore you with the house details. You just need to know that I had 2 older brothers, Logan and Drew, and our favorite part of the new place wasn't even inside. It was the backyard. Sprawling hedges twisted into a perfect maze where we played tag for hours. But the best part by far was the treehouse at the edge of the property. Though treehouse isn't the right word. This thing was a tree fortress. It stretched between several thick oaks and maples that lined the back fence, just past where the yard blurred into forest. It had 3 levels, real stairs, even a lookout perch. This wasn't your average wooden box nailed together on a Saturday afternoon. Someone had hired a pro to build it. For the first few months, my brothers and I spent every free moment up there. We had water gun fights, made up spy missions, even brought snacks. But over time, Logan and Drew started ditching me. They got older, hit that too cool for everything phase, and I was left playing up there alone. I remember how quiet it felt when they stopped coming. Like the air inside the treehouse had changed. Still, I climbed up every day after school, hoping they'd come back. They never did. Then one day, something weird happened. Tucked into the corner of the top floor was a neatly folded piece of paper. I opened it, and it said, "Hi. I'm the Marshmallow Man, nice to meet you. What's your name?" I was thrilled. I figured one of my brothers was trying to pull me back in with a new game. There was even a small stack of blank paper I hadn't noticed before. So I grabbed a marker and wrote back, telling the Marshmallow Man my name. I left the note right where I found his. I couldn't wait to see what happened next. That night at dinner, I almost asked my brothers if they were the Marshmallow Man, but I stopped myself. I didn't want to ruin it. If they knew I liked it, they might stop. The next day, I ran home from school and climbed straight up to the treehouse. Another note was waiting for me. And the day after that. At first, the notes were playful, short and silly, like something a kid would write. I was sure it was Logan or Drew. But then, things started to change. The notes became more personal. The Marshmallow Man asked strange questions like, "What time do you go outside the most?" or "What do you usually eat for breakfast?" I didn't think much of it then. I still believed it was a game. Maybe they were building up to some big prank. But then came the note that still makes me sick when I think about it. "Which window is your bedroom?" I remember staring at that note for a long time. Something about it felt off. But I still didn't say anything to my parents or brothers. I just answered. Without hesitation. Because I trusted them. I didn't say anything at first. But the next note crossed a line. It said something like, "What do your pajamas smell like?" The second I read it, my stomach turned. I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I stormed back into the house and confronted my younger brothers. I was furious, demanding to know which one of them thought this was funny. They burst out laughing, acting like I was being ridiculous. Both of them swore they had nothing to do with it and mocked me for still believing in the Marshmallow Man. They thought it was a game, some silly story I'd made up when I was little. But to me, it felt real. I was hurt, angry, and confused. I ran out of the room in tears. Instead of going to my parents, I came up with a plan to catch them in the act. I didn't want to be made fun of again. I wanted proof. But I wasn't ready for what actually happened. That night, I crawled into bed and tried to stay awake. Around 2 a.m., I heard a soft tapping at my bedroom window. I froze. I've always been scared of the dark. Even now, I don't like admitting that. But that tapping sound? It made my fear 10 times worse. I stayed completely still under the covers, barely breathing. My eyes stayed glued to the window, but I couldn't make myself move. Eventually, I passed out from exhaustion. The next morning, I got up and pulled back the curtains. And there they were. Dozens of marshmallows, taped to the outside of my window. It had to be my brothers, right? I was furious. I kept my cool all day, pretending I hadn't noticed anything. But deep down, I was ready. That night, I was going to catch them red-handed. I waited. When I heard the familiar tapping again, I jumped out of bed, heart pounding, and yanked the curtains open, expecting to see one of their dumb faces. But it wasn't them. It was a man. An old man, standing outside my window. His eyes were yellow, his teeth rotted and crooked, and he had thin, greasy patches of hair on his head. When he saw me looking, he smiled. It was the kind of smile that made your skin crawl. I screamed so loud I couldn't hear myself over the pounding in my chest. My parents rushed into the room, but by the time they got there, he was gone. We called the police. They searched the property, every inch of the backyard, the shed, even our old playhouse out by the woods. Nothing. Not a footprint. Not a hint. The man had vanished. Neighbors came over, concerned by the noise and the police presence. When my parents explained what had happened, their faces went pale. I told the officers everything, handed over the creepy notes. They took them, sure, but I'm not convinced they ever did anything with them. The man never came back. But after that, I never went near the playhouse again. Now I'm grown and have a family of my own. My parents still live in that same house, and every time I visit, I glance out the upstairs window at the treehouse, just to make sure it's still empty. That whole thing still haunts me. Especially lately. See, my youngest, Luke, just left for college. And I'm proud of him, I am. But the house feels quieter now. Too quiet. Funny how that works. When your kids are small, you dream of peace and quiet. But once it comes, it doesn't feel peaceful. It feels hollow. I don't know why, but his leaving stirred up something in my memory I hadn't thought about in years. Maybe it's normal, like people say, remembering stuff from when your kid was little. There's one memory in particular that's been coming back to me. Luke was 8. Just a kid. Full of questions, always exploring, always barefoot even when I told him not to be. I can still see him running around the backyard with a stick in his hand, pretending it was a sword. Back then, I was more energetic. I work with my hands, I'm a carpenter, and I used to love doing little projects around the house. One of the best things I ever built was that treehouse. For Luke. And not some thrown-together shack. I'm talking real walls, a roof, a ladder with rails. It even had a small window and a little ledge inside where he kept snacks or toys. I built it so well it's still standing today. My wife, Christy, wasn't exactly thrilled with the idea at first. She worried it was too high off the ground. Said it didn't seem safe. But Luke was already climbing trees like a monkey. so I figured a sturdy ladder was better than broken branches. Eventually, she warmed up to it. And Luke. He adored that treehouse. It became his little world. Let me explain the setup a bit. Our house sits at the end of a dead-end road in a small town called Maple Hollow. The yard backs right up against dense woods, tall trees, thick brush. Quiet. Isolated. We liked it that way. Still do. I've lost count of how many delivery drivers have missed our driveway over the years. The yard itself isn't that big, but I built the treehouse in the one spot you could see clearly from our bedroom window. That was intentional. I couldn't see inside the treehouse, but I had a perfect view of the ladder. I wanted to keep an eye on him. Just in case. I had no idea how important that would become. My son, Lucas, loved spending time in the old treehouse behind our house. We built it together the summer after we moved in. His older brother, Dylan, had already grown out of that phase, so Lucas pretty much had the place to himself. He'd go up there for hours, nothing unusual, just a quiet kid with a big imagination. Then, sometime that fall, Lucas started talking about a friend named Jake. He'd never mentioned this kid before, and I was sure we didn't have any neighbors with a boy by that name. It was pretty obvious Jake wasn't real. Still, imaginary friends aren't rare, though Lucas was 8, and most kids seem to leave that behind by then. My wife, Emily, thought it was harmless, kind of cute, even. But I wasn't so sure. Lucas had never been the kind of kid to invent friends out of thin air. He was grounded. Curious, but not the whimsical type. I brushed it off, chalking it up to a kid needing a little escape. But then something changed. Lucas began spending more and more time up in that treehouse. He wasn't taking action figures or books or anything with him. Just going. Sitting. Sometimes for hours. No snacks. No music. Just sitting. We'd told him not to carry heavy stuff up there, it wasn't the sturdiest structure, and yet, he kept sneaking things up. One afternoon, I asked him straight out, "Hey, bud, what do you and Jake play up there?" He got quiet. Real quiet. Then he said, "Jake doesn't like to be talked about." That gave me pause. When I asked why Jake wouldn't come inside and play video games or something, Lucas told me Jake only likes it up in the treehouse. Said he doesn't like the smell of the house or the sound of the TV. Weird, right? I looked it up later. Apparently, some kids do restrict their imaginary friends to certain places. Still, something felt off. Emily started getting nervous too. She thought the whole thing was going too far. But we weren't the type to hover. Our rule was, school comes first, chores get done, then do what you want. Most weekends, Lucas would play outside with the neighborhood kids until the porch lights came on. Good group of kids, normal, kind, playful. That's why it hit me hard when Lucas came home one Saturday with a black eye. He looked shaken. Wouldn't say a word at first. I sat him down in the kitchen, cleaned him up, and gently asked what happened. He stared at the floor. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "I got in a fight with Jake." I blinked. "Who's Jake's dad?" I asked, trying to make sense of it. Then it hit me. He meant that Jake. I told him this wasn't funny and not to lie. But instead of correcting himself, Lucas just burst into tears and ran to his room. Emily was convinced one of the neighborhood boys had hit him and Lucas was embarrassed to name names. That seemed likely. She wanted me to tear the treehouse down right then and there. I couldn't do it. That treehouse was something special. We'd built it with our own hands. Besides, it still felt like overkill. I figured I'd talk to Lucas, set some boundaries. But he shut down. Wouldn't come out. Wouldn't speak to either of us the rest of the day. The next morning, I climbed into the treehouse myself. And what I found wasn't just strange. It was wrong. There were old sneakers and socks scattered across the floor, filthy, stiff with dirt. Not Lucas's. Not Dylan's. I was sure of that. Dylan's old shoes had been donated years ago. But it wasn't just shoes. There were crumpled food wrappers, torn chip bags, and a few dirty forks and plates. Who eats meals in a dusty treehouse? And on the walls, pencil drawings. Dozens of them. Foxes, owls, bears. Some deer. All forest animals. Realistic too, almost too good for a kid his age. But one drawing stood out, a giant spider. Huge legs, detailed fangs, and a head that had been scribbled over in thick black pencil until the paper tore. It made my skin crawl. I climbed down fast and called Lucas into the kitchen. I asked him directly what was going on in the treehouse. He hesitated, then told me something even more bizarre. Jake only talks when he's full. I have to bring him snacks. That's why I took the food. And the shoes, those are Jake's too. He forgets them sometimes. That was it. I told Lucas he wasn't allowed back in the treehouse. No more games. No more Jake. He didn't argue. Just nodded and looked away. I thought maybe he was embarrassed, maybe he'd finally let the fantasy go. But deep down, I had a feeling he was still lying to me. Emily brought up therapy. I started thinking maybe she was right. But that night, something happened. I was standing by our bedroom window. The wind had picked up. The leaves were rustling hard. And just as I was about to draw the curtain closed, I saw it. Movement. Near the treehouse. My heart sank. I figured Lucas had snuck out, even after everything. But when I looked closer, I realized. It wasn't Lucas. A pale, sickly boy was climbing down from the treehouse steps in our front yard. But it wasn't Luke. And I'd never seen this kid before, not from our street or even the nearby blocks. His clothes were torn and dusty, like he'd been sleeping in the dirt. He moved slowly, like he hadn't eaten in days. I ran out the front door, yelling for him to stop. The moment I stepped outside, he bolted, darting into the woods across the street. I chased him instinctively, but the kid was fast. Scary fast. Within seconds, he vanished between the trees. Christy called every neighbor on the street. No one was missing a child. All the kids were safe at home. We called the police. They searched the wooded patch for nearly an hour, flashlights cutting through the trees, dogs barking, but nothing. No trace of the kid. And not a single missing child report had come in from anywhere nearby. It just didn't make any sense. The officers asked if they could speak with my son, Luke, and with my permission, they sat down with him in the living room. What he told them chilled me to my core. Apparently, the boy's name was Jake. He said he lived in the woods. But not just that, he told Luke he was a magic boy who had special friends out there. Friends with names like bear, fox, deer. Luke said Jake would visit him often and beg him to come live in the forest, to leave his family behind and join their group. Whenever Luke said no, Jake would get angry. Not screaming or yelling, but making strange animal-like sounds, growls and huffs that Luke couldn't describe well. I couldn't believe I hadn't known any of this was happening. Part of me felt like I'd failed him. The police did a full sweep of the woods after that. Again, they found absolutely nothing. No campfires. No shelters. No footprints. Nothing. We never saw Jake again. Christy, being superstitious as ever, swears Jake wasn't real. She says he was a spirit, or something worse. I never believed in that stuff growing up, but the more she talks about it, the harder it is to brush off. I don't know what's scarier, the idea that something supernatural had its sights on my son, or that there might be actual people, feral or disturbed, living in the woods just behind our house. It happened just a few weeks ago, and it's still fresh in my mind. I live in a quiet neighborhood in upstate New York. But I go to college out in Oregon. I'm a sophomore, and this happened while I was home for fall break in October. I always look forward to coming home, even if it's a little complicated emotionally. I love my parents, really. But they're old school. The kind that still believe college students should be in bed by 10 and think coffee after 5 p.m. is dangerous. One of the things that gets to me the most is how uptight they are about weed. Even though it's legal in New York now, they act like it's heroin. They can't wrap their heads around the idea that I'm an adult, living on my own most of the year. I don't want to be disrespectful under their roof, though, so I always keep things low-key when I'm visiting. I've gotten pretty good at being sneaky. Too good, probably. I've lost count of the times I've slipped out late at night without them knowing. My dad's got a nose like a bloodhound, so lighting up in the house is a death sentence. Thankfully, the old treehouse out front still holds up. My parents built it when I was around 8. It's worn down now, some planks creak, and there's a squirrel nest up in the corner, but it's high enough in the branches that no one notices when someone's up there. Especially at night. From the top, you can see everything: the driveway, the front lawn, the street, even parts of the living room through the big bay window. But from the ground? Unless you know exactly where to look, you'd never see me. When I was a kid, it was my safe place. A little world away from everything. And I guess, in some ways, it still is. It's tough to explain what that place means to me. Just thinking about it brings back waves of memories. But anyway, here's what happened that night. It was the Saturday before I had to fly back to Portland. My parents were at a formal dinner party for some charity thing, probably wouldn't be home till close to midnight. I didn't know the exact time they'd get back, so I didn't want to take any risks. I grabbed my stash and climbed up into the treehouse. The air had that late October bite, sharp enough that I could see my breath. Something about the cold always makes me feel more nostalgic. Maybe that's just me. It was quiet. Peaceful. The wind rustled the leaves gently, and a few porch lights flickered along the street. Being up high always gave me this strange sense of comfort, like the world couldn't touch me up there. I watched the sun dip below the houses and felt that quiet calm you only get right before darkness fully sets in. By the time I finished, it was night. I was just about to pack up when I saw it. A light turned on inside the house. I froze. I knew I was the only one home. My body locked up as I stared at the window, unable to look away. It was the kitchen light. Just one light, but it was enough to feel like a spotlight. My heart thudded in my chest. Then movement in the yard snapped me out of it. 3 hooded figures were moving along the fence line. They were fast, slinking across the lawn like they knew the layout. I felt my stomach drop. They gathered at the front steps, crouching low. And then, as if they'd timed it, a 4th person opened the front door from inside. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened as I realized what was happening. They were breaking in. My home was being robbed. I wanted to scream. To run. To do something. But I couldn't move. I just sat there in the shadows of the treehouse, watching through the leaves as strangers slipped into my house like they owned it. Part of me still didn't believe it was real. But the pounding in my ears told me otherwise. That's the only way I can describe the panic I felt. Like every nerve in my body was screaming to act. One of the figures stayed out in the yard, pacing like a wolf on patrol. Something deep inside me kicked in, maybe instinct, maybe fear, because when I looked down, my phone was already in my hand, the keypad glowing on the screen. Without even thinking, I dialed 911 and whispered into the phone, trying to keep my voice low and steady. I told the operator someone had broken into the house, and then I hung up. But as I pulled my phone away, the glow from the screen must have caught the guy's attention. He snapped his head up toward the treehouse like he'd seen a ghost. I ducked fast, heart pounding, but I had a sinking feeling I'd been spotted. A few seconds later, that fear was confirmed. I heard a voice shout, "Hey!" Loud, aggressive, and definitely aimed at me. Peeking over one of the wooden floorboards, I saw him, a tall figure in dark clothes, marching toward the base of the tree. He didn't hesitate. He knew exactly where I was hiding. He reached the bottom and started climbing. The planks creaked as his weight shifted onto them. I yelled down that the cops were already on their way, hoping it might scare him off. But he didn't flinch. He just kept coming, each hand gripping the old wood like he had one goal: reach me. In a total panic, I grabbed the only thing within arm's reach, an old thermos I had left up there from earlier that day. I hurled it down with all the strength I had. It cracked against the side of his head, hard. He let out a sharp curse and fell backward, landing with a heavy thud in the dirt. He wasn't very far up, but it was enough to knock the wind out of him, or at least his confidence. Instead of climbing again, he bolted back toward the house and shouted something at the others inside. Seconds later, all four of them came sprinting through the backyard, the same way they must have entered. My heart wouldn't slow down. It felt like it was trying to break free from my chest. Less than 3 minutes later, the police arrived. As I climbed down, my legs were shaking so badly I nearly slipped. I tried to explain what happened, but the words came out jumbled, my mouth not able to keep up with my brain. I told them I hadn't seen a getaway vehicle, and that none of their faces were clear in the dark. Not long after, my parents pulled into the driveway, their faces pale with shock. They were more concerned than angry, thankfully, and stayed close while I talked to the officers. The police said it looked like a planned break-in. They believed the intruders had known my parents would be gone. What they hadn't planned on was me being there. That's the part one still can't shake. I try not to think about what could have happened if that guy had made it all the way up to me. I'm back at school now, trying to get on with life. But the truth is, I haven't had a decent night's sleep since that night. Every creak, every rustle outside my window makes me jump. What scares me most is the thought that they might come back. And even worse, my parents are home alone most nights. That thought keeps me up more than anything else. I hope this is the last chapter of the story. But if anything ever happens again, I'll share it. I just pray I never have to. When I was a kid, something happened that still haunts me long before that night with the break-in. We moved to our old place in southern Indiana when I was 4. I don't remember much about the house before that, it's all a blur. But we stayed in that next house for 10 years, until I turned 14. That's the house I think of when I say home. It was a small 2-story with pale blue siding, backed up against a patch of woods. I have good memories, they're really good ones. Family barbecues, summer storms, snow days. But there was one feature of that property that always stuck with me, the old treehouse in the backyard. It was already there when we moved in, built by the previous owner for his kids. My parents said it was one of the reasons they picked the house. My older brother, Kyle, was 6 when we moved in, and according to them, we both lit up when we saw it. We spent years playing up there, forts, make-believe, you name it. But things changed. By the time I turned 12, I'd mostly grown out of it. I was getting into arguments at school, pushing boundaries at home, acting out like most kids my age. My parents were constantly grounding me. I'd get mouthy, slam doors, say stupid things I didn't mean. Typical angsty behavior, but looking back, I know I put them through hell. One weekend, after another bad meeting with the school counselor, my dad grounded me again, no friends, no video games. I was furious. In my dramatic, teenage brain, I thought I hated them. Like they just didn't get me. So I grabbed my hoodie, stomped out into the backyard, and climbed up into the treehouse, my old escape. I didn't know then, that would be the last peaceful moment I ever had up there. That night, I just couldn't stay in the house. I grabbed 2 blankets, a pillow, and slipped out the back door into the chilly evening air. I headed for the old treehouse in our backyard, tucked between 2 large oaks near the fence line. It wasn't my first time doing this. My parents knew I'd sneak out there sometimes when I couldn't sleep. They never said much about it. I think it was my little way of pushing back, quietly. What my dad didn't know, though, was that I'd brought my Nintendo DS with me. Screens were off limits at night in our house, but that didn't stop me. I played Animal Crossing for hours, tucked into my sleeping bag, the soft glow of the screen lighting up the wooden walls around me. Eventually, my eyes got heavy. I must have dozed off, but it couldn't have been for long. I didn't feel like I'd even hit deep sleep yet when I heard it. Tommy. A man's voice. Calm, low, and close. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. I sat up slowly, confused and disoriented. Tommy. You up there? The voice asked again. It sounded almost like my dad, but off. Too deep. Too calm. My heart started pounding in my chest, like my body knew something before my mind did. Then I heard it, the faint creak of someone stepping onto the wooden ladder. Each slow step made the old boards groan, louder than they ever seemed during the day. I froze. And then, through the square opening in the treehouse floor, a shape appeared. A man's head. Just the outline in the darkness. No face, just a shadow. There you are, he said. I whispered, Dad? My voice cracked. He didn't answer. For nearly half a minute, I just stared at the head in the floor, and it didn't move. My eyes were still adjusting to the dark, but I had this awful, gut-deep feeling. That wasn't my dad. I bolted to the side window of the treehouse and screamed. Dad! Dad! The porch light flicked on. I heard the back door slam open, and feet pounding across the yard. At the same time, I heard someone scrambling down the ladder fast, too fast, and by the time my parents reached me, whoever had been there was gone. My dad wasn't angry. He wasn't trying to scare me. He was pale and rattled, and he believed me right away. It wasn't like one of those movies where the parents roll their eyes. My uncle was a police officer back then. Dad called him, and he came over the next morning. Filed a report and everything. But there wasn't much to go on. I didn't see a face. Just a deep voice, a shadowed head, and the fact that he knew my name. I never slept in the treehouse again. For a long time, my dad suspected one of the neighbors across the street. But he could never prove anything. Years later, when that neighbor would wave at me, I'd try to match his voice to the one from that night. But I could never be sure. That memory still sits in the back of my mind, quiet, blurry, and cold. What do you think it was? A stranger? Or something worse? Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. Before I start, just one thing: if you're ever thinking about moving in with someone you've only been dating for a few months, don't. Trust me. I had to learn the hard way. After my last breakup, I was left with no choice but to move back in with my parents. My ex and I had been living in Denver, sharing an apartment we barely managed to afford together. That lease? Big mistake. Turns out, he wasn't the person I thought he was. So, there I was back in my hometown of Pine Hollow, Colorado. It's one of those quiet towns tucked away in the Rockies. Peaceful, sure. But if you're in your 20s and used to city life, it feels like the Twilight Zone. I'm not exactly the mountain air and hiking trails kind of girl. I prefer coffee shops that stay open past 8 and the sound of traffic at night. But Pine Hollow? It's the kind of place where you can hear your neighbor sneeze through the trees. This is just temporary though, or at least, that's what I keep telling myself. The plan is to save up, get back on my feet, and never make the mistake of co-signing a lease with a rebound again. Until then, I've gone back to my old job at the urgent care clinic just off Route 17. They were happy to take me back, even if I warned them I wouldn't be staying long. The only problem? They stuck me with the graveyard shift. midnight to 4 a.m. every weekend. The work isn't bad. It's quiet. But that schedule destroys any normal sleep pattern or hope of a social life. Not that there's a lot going on in Pine Hollow anyway. After shifts, I usually grab some food, whatever's open. That night, or morning rather, I clocked out right at 4 a.m. There's a 24-hour bagel spot just a few blocks away that starts serving hot breakfast right when I get off. I pulled in, grabbed a grilled chicken sandwich and a salad, then headed back toward the house. But first, I needed gas. There's this Shell station near the edge of town. Huge parking lot. Creepy quiet, even during the day. One of those places where the lights flicker a little too often and you always feel like someone's watching. Still, it's open all night, so it's convenient. I parked and went inside to pay cash. Just trying to save a few cents, you know? When I came back out to pump, I noticed another car had pulled in, an old blue sedan, probably early 2000s. A guy stepped out just as I started fueling up. He didn't look like a creep at first. Just average. Maybe mid-30s, hoodie and jeans. But then he walked across the island to my side and said, "Wanna see a funny trick?" Ugh. My stomach tightened. Still, like an idiot, I muttered, "Sure, what's the trick?" He did that dumb old joke where you pretend to pull your thumb off your hand. You know the one. Except he kept doing it. Over and over. Glancing up at me, then back at his hands with this weird smirk, like even he knew it was stupid, but wouldn't stop. I forced a laugh. Tried to be polite, hoping he'd just leave. He didn't. He just kept doing it, even after I turned away and stopped reacting. I focused on the pump, silently praying it would click soon. When it finally did, I latched it back and practically ran inside for my change. When I came back out, his car was still there. Still pumping gas. But he was gone. Nowhere. Just gone. The pump was still running, the hose hooked into the car like he'd never left. I didn't want to stick around and find out where he went. I booked it back to the car, threw my food on the passenger seat, and just in case, checked the back seat before getting in. No one. I locked the doors and drove home, heart pounding the whole way. My parents lived just outside town, about 5 minutes from the station. When I got there, I grabbed the hidden spare key from under the porch planter, same spot they've kept it since I was in high school. I let myself in, then quickly put the key back and locked the door behind me. Quietly. Always quietly. They don't hear well, but I still try not to wake them. They've got 2 cars between them, and since I never needed a car in Denver, I've been borrowing my mom's old Honda while I'm here. I sat down at the kitchen table and started eating, finally able to relax. But then, the front door unlocked. I froze. Not creaked. Not rattled. Unlocked. Then opened. Then closed. Mouthful of chicken, I mumbled, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. No footsteps either. I stood up fast and crept toward the front of the house. The foyer was empty. No one. My chest tightened. My ears were ringing. I ran upstairs and burst into my parents' room. Both of them were in bed. Groggy. Confused. Awake now because I'd basically kicked the door open. I whispered, "Someone just came in." My dad was on his feet instantly. He didn't even ask questions, just grabbed the bat from beside the dresser and headed downstairs. I followed, heartbeat thudding in my throat. He flicked on every light as we moved through the house. Living room, kitchen, laundry. Nothing. Then he checked the hiding spot for the spare key. Gone. My mom was clutching her robe, pale. Still had time to scold me for not checking if anyone was watching before I put it back. Dad kept checking every room, one by one. When he got to my brother's old room, the one no one uses anymore, he turned the lights on and moved on. But I stayed behind. Something was bugging me. I got on my knees, checked under the bed. Nothing. Opened the closet. Just a few old coats. Still. I didn't feel right. I went downstairs, where Dad was already opening the basement door. And something deep in my gut told me we weren't alone. Before I tell you the rest, I want to be clear. I know how bad it sounds now, but at that moment, I was just frozen. I didn't go into the basement, not even with my dad already down there. I stayed on the main floor with my mom. But curiosity has a way of pulling you toward danger, and so I wandered into the dining room, just off the front entry. I got on my knees and looked under the table, and that's when I saw him. It didn't feel real. It couldn't be real. But it was him. The man from the gas station. The one I saw earlier that night. He was hiding under our dining room table, curled up like a predator waiting to pounce. I screamed loud. And my mom, startled by my scream, started yelling too. My dad, who's 65, came flying up the basement stairs, ready to fight off whoever it was. The man crawled out and lunged. My dad went at him first, even though this guy had at least 2 decades on him. My mom and I jumped in too. We were all swinging, hitting, scratching, pushing, doing whatever we could. My dad had him by the shoulders, and we weren't about to let him win. It wasn't until all 3 of us were on him that he finally broke loose and ran out the front door. My mom grabbed the phone and called the police right away, and thank God, they showed up fast. But the worst part? He still had the spare key. That night, the cops left a squad car parked in our driveway as a deterrent. My dad shoved a heavy wooden chair under the front doorknob and slept in the living room with the lights on. The next day, he replaced the front door lock, and that was the end of my parents ever hiding a key outside again. I know I brought that man into our lives. I'd been careless. But I can't shake the feeling that he followed me with his headlights off the whole way home. I never saw a car behind me once. I'm just grateful we're okay. Still, that night pushed me closer to finally moving out. See, I actually love driving at night. There's something peaceful about it. No traffic, no honking, just open roads. I'm from New York, Long Island, to be exact, and the traffic there is unbearable. My brother lives in Florida, so I make the drive down every now and then. It's long, sometimes 18 hours, but I like to leave super early, around 2 a.m., to avoid the rush. That Thursday, I did just that. Left home at 2, grabbed a large coffee from the Dunkin' down the street, and got on the road. I wasn't flying this time because I planned on staying a whole month. Didn't want to depend on my brother every time I needed to go somewhere. By the time I hit New Jersey, it was past 3 a.m., and things were going smooth. Once you're out of New York, the drive is easy, just follow I-95 south all the way. Around 4 a.m., I started getting hungry. I saw a highway sign that listed food options at the next exit. Wendy's was on the list, and that sounded good. I hadn't eaten before leaving because, at that hour, my body never feels hungry right away. It always takes a few hours. I took the exit and followed the signs, but I must have ended up in some forgotten corner of New Jersey. No streetlights. Just my headlights cutting through the darkness. The area felt empty. Like one of those places that disappears off the map after midnight. Eventually, I pulled into a dim Wendy's parking lot. A few lights were on, and there was a lone car parked in a corner space near the tree line. The drive-through menu board was glowing, so I figured they were open. I rolled up and waited at the intercom. No one answered. I said excuse me once, just in case someone was half asleep inside. Still nothing. I pulled out my phone, looked up their hours, and of course, they didn't open until 6. That's when it happened, 3 sharp knocks on my driver's side window. I flinched so hard I nearly hit the ceiling. I turned my head, heart pounding, and there was a man standing outside my car. just standing there, smiling. He motioned for me to roll the window down. I hesitated, but cracked it just enough to hear him. He said the place wasn't open, and I nodded, letting him know I just figured that out. Then he said he was stranded. Said his car, the one in the corner, had a dead battery. He looked at me with these pleading eyes and asked if I could help jump it. I told him I didn't have jumper cables, thinking that would be the end of it. But he was ready. "I've got cables in my trunk," he said quickly. I glanced at his car again, angled nose first into the far corner by the woods. It felt off. I couldn't place why. But something in me, it wanted to help. I told myself it was just karma. That if I were in his shoes, I'd want someone to stop. So I agreed. He stepped back, giving me space to drive forward and pull into the spot beside his car. I parked head in, same as him, so our hoods could align. I popped my hood. He opened his trunk and pulled out the jumper cables. We connected them without saying much. He knew what he was doing. I started my car. The engine came to life, and we let it run for a moment. I told him to go ahead and try starting his. He took his time walking to the driver's side. He didn't rush. Then he tried the ignition, and nothing. So we waited. A minute passed. Then 2. And he tried again. I still couldn't hear his car turning over. Which didn't make sense, he'd just pulled into the lot minutes earlier. There's no way his battery needed that long to recharge. Then, he glanced at me, smiled a little, and said, "Hang on," before stepping a few feet away and pulling out his phone. He started talking in a hushed voice, Spanish, I think. I couldn't really understand him, and I wasn't trying to. I stood there awkwardly, tapping my foot, just hoping this wasn't going to take up the rest of my night. I needed to get past him to reach the stall. And honestly, I was scared to get too close. But I tried to act normal. Just another guy minding his business. I walked by at a steady pace and slipped into the stall, locking the door behind me. But the silence inside that bathroom was unnatural. No dripping sink, no faint music from overhead speakers, just dead air. I'm one of those people who can't go with someone else in the room. It's a weird thing, I know. But I froze up. I stood there, trying to relax, hoping the guy would leave. But after a full minute, nothing. So, I flushed anyway, just to make it seem like I did something, and stepped back out. Now he had turned around. Same exact spot, but facing me now. And he was staring. I'm not someone who judges people's looks, but this guy? His face genuinely scared me. It wasn't gory or grotesque. It was the absence of expression. Especially his eyes. Like staring into a mannequin that just blinked. It caught me so off guard. I hadn't spoken to another human all day, and suddenly I'm locked in eye contact with some stranger in a rest stop bathroom at midnight. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked quickly out of there. Back to my car. I threw it into reverse and didn't look back until I saw him. In the rearview mirror. He was walking toward me. I hit the gas and pulled back onto the highway like my life depended on it. For a few miles, I felt relief. I was on the road again, headlights stretching out into emptiness. But one thing hadn't changed, I still had to pee. Badly. I figured I could make it another 20 minutes, tops. I was right. The next rest area showed up just off Route 65. Another cookie-cutter layout, dim streetlights, vending machines, quiet lot. No cars in sight. Good. I parked right up front and rushed inside. The bathroom was cold, cleaner than the last one. I headed straight for the stall. Finally. Let's just say I felt a whole lot better almost instantly. But as I was finishing up, I heard the door open. Footsteps. Slow ones. I figured someone else had pulled in. Maybe headed to the urinals. But the steps didn't stop there. They came straight to my stall and stopped. I looked down. Shoes. Right outside my stall door. Not moving. I froze. I didn't want to believe it, but my gut told me it was the same man. He followed me. My anxiety kicked in hard. I couldn't even get a word out at first. But then, finally, I managed. Someone's in here. No response. Just silence. That's when I knew this wasn't a coincidence. I pulled out my phone and hit 911. Put it on speaker. I wanted him to hear it. The operator answered, 911, what's your emergency? Loud and clear, I said, I'm being followed. I feel threatened. I kept my voice steady. Firm. Like I was daring him to stay. As I gave my location and described everything, I heard it, the footsteps. Backing away. Then the door creaked open. He left. I told the operator what happened, but I said I wasn't leaving until an officer arrived. I waited. Still locked inside. Eventually, there was a knock on the bathroom door. A cop. He checked the place with me, then looked over my car to make sure nothing was tampered with. I described the man. The first rest stop. The second. The look in his eyes. The fact that he didn't speak a word. After they confirmed he was gone, the officer followed me out of the lot. Eventually, he turned off at another exit, and I drove the rest of the night in silence. The rest of the road trip was uneventful. But that night? It stuck with me. I've never had someone follow me before. Not like that. Not with that kind of quiet intensity. And yeah, I'm a guy. People assume this kind of thing only happens to women. But the truth is, anyone can be hunted. Anyone can be prey. That night proved it. Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying the story, let me know in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. It was late on a cold autumn night when the wind howled through the empty streets of our small town, Oakwood. The kind of night when the trees shake and the ground crunches beneath your feet. I was sitting at my desk in the police station, watching the clock tick slowly. It was one of those quiet shifts where nothing ever happens. Or so I thought. I had just turned 29. I'd been living in Oakwood my whole life, working as a deputy for a few years now. It's a small town, where everyone knows everyone's business. People don't lock their doors, and you can walk down the street without worrying about much. But lately, things had felt different. The town felt quieter, somehow, heavier. I remember that night clearly because it was the first time I noticed something strange happening on Elm Street. It was just after midnight when the call came in. A woman, Megan, reported hearing whispers outside her house. She said it sounded like someone was calling her name, but there was no one there. At first, I thought it was a prank, or maybe kids messing around. But something about her voice on the phone sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The fog had already started to roll in. Elm Street is quiet at night, lined with old houses that seem like they belong to another time. Their wooden frames creaked in the wind, the faint yellow light from street lamps barely cutting through the mist. The kind of street that would give anyone the creeps if they were out alone. When I arrived at Megan's house, I could see the porch light flickering. The house was dark, except for a dim glow coming from the living room. I knocked on the door, and Megan opened it slowly. She was pale, her eyes wide with fear. I swear, I heard them again. The voices, she whispered, stepping back to let me in. I could hear the tension in her voice. This wasn't just a trick of the mind. I'll stay here with you for a while, Megan. I need you to stay calm, okay? I said, trying to sound reassuring, though I was starting to feel uneasy myself. She nodded, but I could see she was trembling. As we walked into the living room, I glanced around. Nothing seemed out of place. Just an old house, full of dusty furniture and creaky floorboards. But then, as I walked past the hallway, I noticed something odd. The mirror hanging on the wall at the end of the hall was fogged up, except it wasn't from the cold air. It looked like it had been wiped with a cloth. I felt a sudden urge to turn around, but I shook it off. It's probably just condensation, I muttered to myself, trying to dismiss the thought. Megan was sitting on the couch now, her hands clenched tightly. I heard them again, she whispered. But this time, they weren't outside. They were inside. It felt like they were in the house with me. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "What do you mean inside?" I asked, my voice a little sharper than I intended. "I heard them in the walls," she said, her voice trembling. "It's like they're trying to get out." I stared at her, unsure of what to say. The room suddenly felt colder, and I noticed how quiet it was. No wind. No sounds from the outside world. Just the heavy silence, and the echo of her words. I pulled out my flashlight and moved toward the hallway. The air felt heavy, thick. I shone the light toward the walls, trying to see if anything seemed out of place. But there was nothing. Just old wood, creaky and worn with age. Then, as I stood there, I heard it. A whisper, soft at first, coming from the far side of the room. I turned quickly, but there was nothing. Megan was still on the couch, her face pale with fear. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Megan nodded, her eyes wide with terror. "I told you, they're inside." My heart started racing. The whispers were getting louder now, as if they were coming from every direction at once. They were soft, unintelligible murmurs, but they felt close. Too close. I walked over to the window and pulled the blinds aside. The street outside was empty, just as it always was at night. But something wasn't right. The fog seemed thicker, and the street lamps were flickering, casting long, distorted shadows across the road. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. "Stay here," I said to Megan, trying to sound calm. "I'm going to check the backyard." As I stepped outside, the chill in the air seemed to grow colder. The street was dark, and the fog wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. The sounds of my footsteps echoed in the silence. As I walked toward the backyard, I could feel the hairs on my neck rise again. There was something moving in the shadows, just out of sight. I reached the fence and shone the light toward the trees. The whispers were louder now, but they were coming from behind me, not in front of me. I spun around, but there was no one there. My flashlight flickered, and then nothing. The light went out. I felt a cold rush of panic. I couldn't see a thing, the darkness consuming everything. I pulled out my phone, trying to use its light, but it was dead. "God," I muttered to myself. "What the hell is happening?" Suddenly, I heard the whispers again, but this time, they weren't coming from the house. They were coming from the ground beneath my feet, as if the earth itself was speaking to me. The cold wind picked up, and I could feel something moving through the fog, getting closer and closer. I turned and ran back to the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't even look back. When I got inside, I slammed the door shut behind me, panting. Megan was still on the couch, staring at me wide-eyed. The whispers had stopped. I stood there, trying to catch my breath. "We need to leave," I said, my voice shaking. Megan nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "It's too late," she whispered. I didn't understand what she meant at first. But as I turned to the door, I saw something in the hallway mirror, a figure standing behind me, just out of reach, its eyes dark and hollow. I froze. And then the whispers came again, louder than ever, surrounding me from every direction. It was late October in the small town of Willow Creek, a quiet place tucked between rolling hills and dense forests. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other's name, but it still had a certain eerie calm after dark. The air was crisp with the bite of autumn, and the trees were shedding their golden leaves, leaving the streets covered in a blanket of orange and brown. Jake had been the town's sheriff for just over 5 years. He was a tall man with a stern face, but his soft eyes showed a depth of weariness that came from too many years of service. His wife had passed away 2 years ago, and he still hadn't quite found his footing without her. The loneliness crept in at night when the town was quiet and all he could hear was the sound of the wind brushing against his window. The job was his escape, but it also reminded him of the void he felt in his heart. One chilly evening, Jake found himself driving the usual patrol route, an old, winding road that stretched through the outskirts of town. The headlights cut through the thick fog that had settled in the valley. It was always foggy this time of year, but tonight, something felt different. The road seemed quieter, darker, as if the fog had swallowed everything around it. Even the sound of the wind had disappeared. Jake passed by the old farmhouse on the edge of town. It had been abandoned for years, the windows boarded up, the paint peeling off the wooden walls. There were rumors about the place, stories about strange noises and flickering lights at night, but Jake had always written it off as the product of bored small-town minds. Tonight, though, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His radio crackled, and for a second, he thought he heard something through the static, something faint, like whispering. He rolled his window down, trying to listen. The whispering faded, but in its place, there was something far more unsettling: footsteps. Slowly, as if someone was walking along the road just ahead of him. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He pulled over, hand on his holstered gun, but there was no one in sight. The fog was so thick, it was impossible to see anything more than a few feet in front of him. For a moment, Jake sat in silence, trying to make sense of what he had heard. He should have just driven on, but something compelled him to get out of the car. The air was cold, biting at his skin as he stepped onto the gravel. The footsteps had stopped, but he could still feel a presence, like someone or something was watching him from the shadows. He walked toward the farmhouse, the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel the only noise in the oppressive quiet. The closer he got to the house, the more uneasy he felt. The old porch creaked as he stepped onto it, and for a moment, he thought he saw something move in the corner of his eye. He turned quickly, but there was nothing. He reached for the door, hesitating for just a moment. It was unlocked, the wood groaning as he pushed it open. The interior was just as Jake had expected: dark, dusty, and filled with the scent of decay. The furniture was overturned, abandoned as though the house had been left in a hurry. But as Jake stepped further inside, the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. It was cold in there, colder than it should have been for a fall night. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him, and Jake spun around, his heart racing. His flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. That's when he heard it, faint, but clear, a soft, slow tapping coming from upstairs. It was almost rhythmic, like someone was tapping a finger against the wood. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He was a seasoned officer, not one to be frightened by a noise, but this was different. This felt like something he couldn't explain. With every step he took toward the stairs, the tapping grew louder. The floorboards groaned beneath him, echoing in the stillness of the house. Jake reached the top of the stairs and slowly moved down the hallway, following the sound. At the end of the hall was a small room, the door cracked open. He pushed it open with caution, the sound of his breath sharpened the quiet. The room was dark, the only light coming from his flashlight. On the floor in the corner was an old music box, its lid half open. The tapping was coming from inside. His hand shook as he picked it up, the lid creaking open. And then, silence. Jake froze, his eyes locked on the inside of the box. There was nothing there. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye: a figure standing in the doorway, just beyond the beam of his flashlight. It was a tall silhouette, the outline of a person, but no details. No face. Just darkness. Jake's breath caught in his chest. "Who's there?" he called out, but his voice was hoarse, barely audible. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching him. And then, the silence was shattered by the sound of a door slamming downstairs. Jake spun around, heart pounding, but when he looked back toward the doorway, the figure was gone. The house was still again. Too still. He hurried down the stairs, barely stopping to think. As he reached the front door, he felt cold fingers brushing against his neck. He whirled around, but there was no one. The house was empty. Jake didn't stop running until he was back in his car, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. The fog outside seemed thicker now, heavier, like the town itself was closing in. He drove straight back to the station, his mind racing with the questions he couldn't answer. Was it a prank? A person hiding in the house? Or something else, something far darker? He didn't know, but the one thing he did know was that he wasn't going back to that house. Not ever. And as the night wore on, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that, somewhere in the distance, the tapping would begin again. It was late October in the small town of Willow Creek. The air was cool, and the leaves on the trees rustled with the soft autumn breeze. The fog had settled over the roads, making everything look like it was covered in a thin, eerie blanket. I had just finished my shift as a night security guard at the old hospital on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was steady work. Still, the place gave me a chill. I'd been there a few months, ever since I lost my job at the diner. Losing it wasn't a surprise, not with everything going on, and my wife had left me earlier that year, and the bills were piling up. I guess you could say I was a little lost. I hadn't been sleeping much, just sitting up late at night, scrolling through my phone, wondering if I'd ever get back to where I was before. The hospital was old, built in the 40s. The halls always creaked, and the flickering lights didn't help much either. The patients who stayed there were rarely awake when I did my rounds. The doctors and nurses were mostly gone by midnight, leaving me to patrol the empty, echoing hallways. That night, I noticed something odd. The phone on the security desk had been off the hook. I always made sure it was on, just in case. But tonight, it wasn't. I couldn't remember hearing it ring or anything, but I knew it hadn't been like that before. I set it back on the receiver and went to check the security monitors. Everything looked fine until I noticed something strange. In one of the hallways, a door that should have been closed was slightly ajar. I had checked that hallway only an hour earlier. It was locked then. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the monitor. I wasn't sure if it was my tired eyes playing tricks on me, but I had a feeling something wasn't right. I grabbed my flashlight and headed down the corridor. The old wooden floors creaked beneath my boots. The flickering lights made shadows dance on the walls, and the smell of something old, like rotting wood, lingered in the air. As I walked past room after room, I could feel the silence pressing in around me. It was the kind of silence that felt unnatural, the kind where you felt like you weren't alone, even though you couldn't see anyone. When I reached the door that had been left open, I hesitated. The hall was empty, just a few rooms, some old paintings on the walls. But as I stepped closer, I heard a faint sound, like the soft clicking of a keyboard. I knew the building wasn't supposed to have anyone else in it tonight. The sound stopped when I pushed the door open, and I felt my heart thud against my chest. Inside, the desk in the corner was untouched, but the computer screen was on. It shouldn't have been, it wasn't plugged in, yet it was glowing with a pale blue light. I took a step closer, trying to make sense of it. Suddenly, the screen flickered, and a message appeared. It was simple, just one line, but it made my blood run cold. "Are you watching me?" I froze, staring at the screen. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't know what to do. I tried to convince myself that it was a glitch, some kind of freak electrical malfunction. But then, the message changed. "I can see you." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I stumbled backward, knocking into the chair beside the desk. The computer went black. I looked around, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The hallway was still empty. No one was there. The whole room felt colder now, the air thick and heavy. I glanced at the clock on the wall, 3:15 a.m. I should have been out of there by now. I turned to leave, but then I heard it. A soft sound, like footsteps coming from down the hall. Slow, deliberate. I couldn't see anyone, but the sound was getting closer. I stood there for a moment, my heart racing. The footsteps stopped. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but before I could move, the lights above me flickered again, and the temperature seemed to drop. I rushed back to the security desk, grabbed my keys, and made my way to the exit. I wasn't about to stick around any longer. But as I passed the front doors, something made me pause. The reflection in the glass stopped me cold. There, standing at the far end of the parking lot, was a figure. I couldn't make out any details, just a shadow, tall and thin. For a moment, I thought it was someone else, maybe a patient or staff member who'd gotten lost. But the closer I looked, the more I realized there was something wrong with it. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there, staring at me. I backed away, my legs shaking. The figure didn't move, but I could feel it watching me. I was sure of it. I ran to my car, started it up, and sped away, not daring to look back. As I drove through the foggy streets of Willow Creek, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me. That something had been watching me for a long time. I haven't been back to that hospital since that night. I don't know if it was just exhaustion or if what I saw was real. But I still can't stop thinking about it. What do you think happened that night? Do you believe in things like that? Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when you were sure you were alone? It was a quiet evening in the small town of Hollow Creek, a place where most people knew each other, and the streets felt peaceful. The houses were close together, lined with old trees and the occasional fog that rolled in from the nearby woods. A soft autumn breeze rustled the leaves, carrying the smell of damp earth and wet grass. The wind had picked up as I pulled into my driveway that Friday night. I'd just gotten off work, and the day had been long. My wife, Sarah, had gone out with some friends, leaving me alone at home. I didn't mind the silence sometimes, it was nice. The house creaked as I stepped inside, the old wood groaning underfoot like it always did when the weather turned cold. It was one of those houses that had been passed down for generations. You could feel the weight of time in its walls. After setting down my bag, I walked into the kitchen. The kitchen light flickered for a moment, then stayed steady. The kind of thing that never used to bother me, but lately, it was starting to feel off. I poured myself a glass of water, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine. That's when I heard it, the sound of footsteps above me. I froze. We didn't have guests, and Sarah wasn't home. The house was empty, except for me. Slowly, I walked toward the stairs, my heart thudding in my chest. The house was old, sure, but those footsteps didn't sound like the usual creaks of the floorboards. These were deliberate. Heavy. I crept up the stairs, trying to be as quiet as possible. My breath caught in my throat as I reached the top. The door to the guest room was slightly ajar, but there was no one inside. Still, the feeling didn't go away. It lingered, thick and heavy in the air. I checked the windows, locked. I checked the door, secure. Nothing out of place. I went back downstairs and tried to shake it off. I told myself it was just the wind or maybe the old house settling. I went to the living room, sat down, and turned on the TV. But the silence wasn't the same. It felt heavier, like something was watching, waiting. The doorbell rang. I jumped, startled. It was late, after all. Who could be at the door? No one in Hollow Creek ever came by this late. I walked cautiously toward the door, checking through the peephole. No one. Maybe it was a prank, I thought, but the unease wouldn't leave. I stood there for a moment, listening. The silence felt too deep, too still. Then the doorbell rang again, this time more insistent. I looked around the yard. It was dark, the streetlight flickering in the distance. There was no sign of anyone. I felt my hands start to shake as I slowly backed away from the door. That's when I heard it again, the footsteps. This time, they were coming from the stairs. I turned quickly, heart racing. But when I checked, there was nothing there. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me even more. It was Sarah. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice distant, crackling through the phone. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think I'm just tired. The house is making some weird noises." "I'm sorry I'm not there," she said, a slight worry in her tone. "Maybe you should check the place out? Make sure it's locked up?" "I already did," I said. "I'm fine. It's nothing." After we hung up, I walked around the house again, checking every lock and every window. Everything seemed normal. The feeling of being watched didn't leave, though. It grew stronger, like something was hiding just out of sight. The next morning, I woke up late, too late for a good start. I had trouble falling asleep, and when I finally did, it was restless. The sound of the wind howling outside only added to the sense of discomfort. When Sarah got home that afternoon, I told her about the doorbell and the footsteps. "It's probably nothing," she said, brushing it off. "Maybe a raccoon or something got into the walls." But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling. The feeling that something was wrong. The days passed, but the unease didn't go away. I noticed little things that hadn't been there before. The way the TV would flicker on and off by itself. The doorbell ringing without anyone there. The feeling of eyes on the back of my neck as I walked through the house. Then one night, it happened again. The doorbell rang. I looked out through the peephole, and this time, I saw something. A shadow. It moved quickly, too quickly, from one side of the door to the other. Then it was gone. I opened the door to find nothing but the cool night air and the faint scent of damp earth. I checked the yard, the street. Empty. That's when I heard it, the softest of whispers, right behind me. "Help me." I spun around, but there was nothing there. I called the police, even though I didn't want to seem crazy. They came and checked the house, but they didn't find anything either. They told me it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But it didn't feel like that. The next few weeks were a blur of restless nights and constant fear. I couldn't sleep without hearing the whispers. I couldn't walk through the house without feeling like something was following me. One evening, Sarah went out with friends, and I was alone again. The house was quiet, too quiet. I heard the footsteps again, coming from above. But this time, they weren't just above, they were following me. I looked into the guest room once more. This time, I saw it. A figure. Just a shadow, barely noticeable, but there. I slammed the door shut and locked it. The air felt thick, suffocating. That was the last time I stayed in the house. I packed up, grabbed Sarah, and we left for good. No one knows what it was that followed me, but I'm certain it wasn't just my imagination. I still wonder, what do you think it was? Have you ever felt something like that before? Something that follows you even when you think you're safe? Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. It was late October, and the air in Maple Hollow had already turned cold. The leaves were falling fast, covering the sidewalks in crunchy layers of red and gold. People were carving pumpkins, hanging fake spider webs, and getting ready for Halloween. I'm Chris. I work the night shift as a deputy in town. It's quiet work most nights, just helping lost dogs get home. checking up on locked stores, maybe chasing the occasional raccoon out of someone's trash. But that night was different. It started normal. I left the station around 10 p.m. and took the usual route through the north end of town. I like that part. It's older, filled with old houses and tall oak trees. But as I turned onto Willow Creek Road, my radio crackled. It was a weak signal. Just static at first. Then a soft voice came through. "Help, someone's watching me." I grabbed the mic. "This is Deputy Chris." "Who is this? What's your location?" No reply. Just static again. Then silence. I paused. That road had been empty for years. There used to be a big farmhouse near the woods. People said it was haunted, but I always thought it was just a story to scare kids. Still, the message had come through when I was driving right past it. I slowed down and pulled over near the old gate. The house was barely visible beyond the trees, just a dark shape with a broken roof. My breath came out in white puffs as I stepped out of the car. The wind was sharp. The kind that cuts through your jacket. I walked down the path with my flashlight in hand. The leaves rustled beneath my boots. The gate creaked when I pushed it open. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. One of the upstairs windows was glowing faintly. It wasn't bright like a lamp, just a soft blue light, like a phone screen. I called out. "Hello? This is the sheriff's department. Is anyone there?" No answer. I climbed the porch stairs. They groaned under my weight. The front door was cracked open. I pushed it slowly. The hinges squealed like a scream. The inside smelled like old wood and dust. The wallpaper was peeling. There were broken chairs, shattered glass, and old newspapers scattered on the floor. It felt like time had stopped here. I called out again. Still nothing. Then I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Light. Fast. "Hello?" I called. "Are you okay?" The sound stopped. I went up slowly, each step making the stairs creak louder. The hallway was dark, but that blue light was still glowing from the last room on the left. I reached the door and pushed it open. No one was inside. But there was an old phone on the floor. Not a smartphone, something older. A flip phone, blinking softly like it had just received a message. I bent down and picked it up. One new message. I opened it. It read, "Don't let it follow you." I froze. And then, behind me, a whisper. Low. Male. Right in my ear. "You're too late." I spun around. No one. The hallway was empty. But the air had changed. It felt thicker. Colder. I hurried back downstairs, phone still in my hand. As I reached the bottom, the door slammed shut behind me. I pulled it open and ran to my patrol car. As soon as I got inside, the radio came alive again. But it wasn't dispatch. It was the same voice from the phone message. "Did you see it?" I didn't respond. My hands were shaking too much. Then something moved in the rearview mirror. Just a shadow. Faint. But there. I turned quickly, but the back seat was empty. I drove back to the station in silence. When I arrived, I handed the phone over to the evidence room and wrote my report. I didn't mention the voice. Or the shadow. Just the trespassing call and the abandoned house. The next day, I went back to Willow Creek Road with 2 other officers. But the house? It was gone. I swear to you, it was gone. All that remained was a crumbling foundation and a rusted mailbox. Like it had burned down years ago. But the phone? Still in our evidence locker. And every few nights, it blinks. Same message. Don't let it follow you. I still work nights. I still patrol that area. But I don't stop there anymore. I drive past fast, without looking. And sometimes, when my radio crackles, I turn it off. Because I don't want to hear what's on the other end. I grew up in a small town called Millfield, tucked between two faded highways and surrounded by old pine trees. Most folks here knew each other, or at least waved when they passed on the road. It was quiet. Almost too quiet sometimes. After my mom died, I moved back in with my dad. He lived in one of the oldest houses in town, an old white place with chipped paint and a rusted swing in the front yard. The kind of house that creaked even when no one was moving. I was 27. Depressed. Alone. I'd just gone through a messy breakup, lost my job in Denver, and my phone barely buzzed anymore. Coming back home was supposed to help. It didn't. Dad wasn't much for talking. We mostly ate in silence and watched reruns of old game shows. At night, I sat on the porch, scrolling through my cracked phone, even though I had no new messages. The house sat on the edge of Hollow Pine Road. Just past us, the street turned into thick woods. There weren't any streetlights back there. At night, it was pitch black except for one old light that flickered near the woods. It buzzed and blinked like it didn't want to stay alive. That light always made me uneasy. Something about it felt wrong. One evening in October, I noticed something strange. I was out on the porch, just watching the fog roll in over the pines. The wind was cold, and dead leaves danced across the road. I heard footsteps. Soft. Slow. Crunching the gravel. I looked toward the light. No one was there. But the light flickered hard, then went completely out. A minute later, it blinked back on, and I swear I saw someone standing underneath it. Just a shadow. Tall. Still. No face. No movement. Just standing. Then it was gone. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. My eyes were tired. I didn't mention it to Dad. I just went inside and locked the door. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing creaks in the hallway. Slow ones. Like footsteps on old wood. But every time I got up to check, no one was there. Just that heavy silence that fills old houses. The next morning, Dad asked if I'd been walking around at night. I said no. He looked pale. Shaken. I thought I saw someone at your door around midnight, he said. Thought it was a friend of yours. I didn't reply. I didn't have friends around here. That day, I drove into town. Tried to distract myself. Got a sandwich. Talked to a few old classmates at the gas station. Everyone acted normal. Like nothing had changed. But when I got back home, something felt off. The front door was cracked open. Inside, everything was untouched except the hallway mirror. It had fog on it. Like someone had breathed on the glass. And in the middle of that fog, someone had drawn a simple smiley face. Just 2 dots and a curve. I stared at it for a long time. Dad swore he hadn't touched it. We cleaned it off together and didn't talk about it. That night, I locked every window. Every door. I even put a chair under my doorknob. Still, I woke up at 3:13 a.m. Something was tapping on my window. Soft. Rhythmic. I peeked through the blinds, expecting nothing. But I saw it. A figure. Tall. Still. Standing just outside the window. No face. No sound. Just the same shape I'd seen under the flickering streetlight. When I blinked, it was gone. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, Dad left town to visit my aunt. He needed a break from the house, he said. I couldn't blame him. I stayed behind. That evening, I sat on the porch again. The wind was colder. The trees whispered. And the light down the road? It was off. Completely dead. Still, I felt it watching me. I went back inside and tried to calm myself. I lit a candle and turned on soft music. I wanted to believe this was just stress. Just my brain playing tricks on me. But then, my phone lit up. A message. From a number I didn't know. Come outside. No name. No reply option. I threw the phone across the room. That night, I dreamt of the figure. Standing at the edge of my bed. Breathing slow. Watching me. I woke up with tears in my eyes and my shirt soaked in sweat. I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and left before sunrise. I haven't been back to Hollow Pine Road since. Dad says the light started working again after I left. No more tapping. No more shadows. But sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still see that smiley face on the mirror. And last week, I got a text. You forgot something. No name. No reply option. I moved to Pine Hollow after my divorce. It's a small town, quiet and cold most of the year. The kind of place where nothing changes and the mailman still waves every morning. I rented a little house on the edge of town. It sat near the woods, just a two-bedroom fixer-upper with creaky floors and old wallpaper that smelled like dust and rain. It was cheap, which I needed. My name's Chris. I fix radios for a living. At first, I thought the silence would be good for me. After all the noise and fighting back in the city, I wanted peace. But Pine Hollow's silence wasn't comforting. It felt too still. Like the world had paused, but I kept moving. A week after I moved in, I started noticing the lamp. It sat in the upstairs window of the old abandoned house across the road. The place had been empty for years, the neighbors said. Belonged to a woman named Clara, died in her sleep. No family. No one ever came to clean it out. But that lamp, it flickered on some nights. Just once or twice a week. Always at the same time, around 3 a.m. It wasn't a regular light. It had a strange greenish glow, like something old and dusty. And it only stayed on for a few minutes before going dark again. I figured maybe it was faulty wiring. Or maybe kids sneaking in. I tried to ignore it. But then I started dreaming. In the dreams, I'd wake up in my own bed but the room would feel wrong, tilted, darker than it should be. I'd hear footsteps downstairs. Slow and heavy. Always stopping right at the bottom of the stairs. I never saw anything. But I always felt something. A presence. One night, I woke up from one of those dreams, heart racing. I looked out my window. The lamp was on again. Except this time, it wasn't flickering. It glowed steady, like it was watching me. That was the night I decided to check it out. I threw on my coat and boots. It was freezing. Fog rolled in low, hugging the ground. The street lamp on the corner buzzed softly, casting long shadows on the wet pavement. I crossed the road and stood at the gate of the old house. The front yard was overgrown with weeds and dead leaves. I hesitated. My breath came out in clouds. Then I heard it. Music. Faint and slow. A lullaby, coming from inside the house. The lamp still glowed in the upstairs window. I pushed open the gate. It creaked like something out of a movie. The front steps were soft with rot, and the porch light was broken. I tried the door. It opened. The air inside was cold and stale. Smelled like mildew and something older, like antique perfume and burned wood. I called out. Hello? Nothing. I stepped inside. Dust floated through the hallway. The wallpaper was peeling, and the floor groaned under my weight. That music was still playing, drifting down the staircase like smoke. I climbed the stairs, one slow step at a time. At the top, I saw it. The lamp. It sat on a small table near the window, exactly where I'd seen it from my house. But here's the thing, it wasn't plugged in. There was no cord. Just a base and a bulb glowing steadily, casting green light across the room. Then the music stopped. And I heard footsteps behind me. I turned fast, heart pounding. Nobody was there. But the hallway was darker now. The shadows looked longer, like they stretched and breathed on their own. I backed away, turned toward the stairs. But a figure stood at the bottom. It was a woman. Gray dress, hair tied in a low bun. Pale face, eyes wide open, staring up at me. She didn't move. Didn't blink. Just stared. I froze. My legs felt like stone. And then, slowly, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was tired. Like someone who had waited a long time for something. She raised her hand and pointed at the lamp. Then the bulb shattered. The room went black. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. I sprinted down the stairs, out the front door, across the street, and didn't breathe until I was back inside my house with the door locked. The next morning, I looked out the window. The lamp was gone. I asked the locals again about the house. One man finally told me the truth. Clara had lived alone for decades. People said she used to sit by that lamp every night, waiting for her son who never came home from the war. After she passed, no one ever touched the house. But folks whispered that she still waited. That the light would come on when she thought he might be near. I haven't seen the lamp since. But I never sleep through the night. Sometimes, I still hear that lullaby. And once, just once, I thought I saw a faint green light flicker in my window. It was a cold October night in Willow Bend, a small town where nothing big ever really happened. The streets were quiet. Most folks were home, watching TV or already in bed. Officer Chris Danner was on the night shift. He was used to silence. Since his wife passed last year, he actually preferred it. No loud calls, no messy situations. Just empty roads and the occasional drunk teenager breaking curfew. That night, Chris was parked near the edge of town, where Pine Street meets Old Creek Road. His headlights lit up the stop sign. There wasn't much else out there, just fog, trees, and the sound of wind brushing against dry leaves. He sipped coffee from a paper cup and stared out into the dark. That's when he saw the man. He was standing under the stop sign. At first, Chris thought he was imagining it. The fog moved strangely, and shadows often play tricks out here. But this was different. The man wasn't moving. He just stood there, head tilted slightly, like he was waiting for something. Chris rolled down the window and called out. "Sir, you okay?" No answer. He turned on the spotlight. The man didn't flinch. He wore a long coat, dark, maybe black, and his face was hard to see. The strange thing was how still he was. No shifting weight, no breath in the cold air. Chris got out of the car. His boots crunched on gravel as he walked toward the stop sign. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt. Like walking underwater. "Sir," he said again, firmer this time. Still no response. Chris stopped about 10 feet away. The man's face was shadowed, but there was something wrong about it. Like it didn't belong. It was pale, maybe too pale. The eyes were open, but they weren't looking at him. More like they were looking through him. And then, just like that, the man was gone. Vanished. Chris spun around. Nothing. No sound, no footsteps, no movement. Just the quiet rustle of dry branches in the wind. He blinked hard and walked back to his car. Was he tired? Maybe losing it? He sat in the cruiser and locked the doors. The dashboard clock blinked 2:13 a.m. That's when the radio crackled. Static at first, then a faint whisper. He leaned in. Dispatch? The whisper came again, clearer now. Don't stop. Chris froze. He waited, but the radio went dead. He checked the GPS. His car showed parked right where he was. Everything looked normal. But that feeling, the weight in his chest, wasn't going away. He turned the key and started driving. Slow at first, headlights barely cutting through the fog. After about 10 minutes, he saw the stop sign again. Same spot. Same road. Same bend. He'd driven in a circle. But that wasn't possible. He hadn't turned. He hadn't passed any intersections. The hairs on his arms stood up. He gripped the wheel tighter. And then, ahead, under the stop sign, he saw the man again. Same coat. Same tilt of the head. Chris slammed on the brakes. He was breathing hard now. No way. This wasn't real. This was a dream. It had to be. But everything around him said otherwise, the cold, the dashboard lights, the smell of burnt coffee in his cup holder. This was real. And the man wasn't moving. Chris didn't get out this time. He slowly backed up, did a U-turn, and headed toward town. He passed the same trees. Same rusted mailbox on the right. Same flickering streetlight next to the old church. Everything was the same. Too same. He looked at his phone. No signal. The radio lit up again. More static. Then a voice, clearer than before, "Don't look back." Chris nearly dropped the mic. His hands shook. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror. Nothing. But then, movement. A figure sitting in the back seat. Not moving. Just sitting there. Chris didn't speak. Didn't breathe. He kept his eyes on the road. The figure didn't move. But he could feel it. The pressure in the air. The heavy silence. The car was colder now. Frost crept along the edge of the windshield. Mile after mile passed. Eventually, the figure was gone. He didn't see it leave. It just wasn't there anymore. Chris drove straight home after that. Didn't stop at the station. Didn't log anything. He parked in his driveway, turned off the engine, and sat there until the sun came up. He never told anyone at work. But the next night, when it was his shift again, he parked somewhere else. He never went back to Pine Street. And he never drove past that stop sign again. Hey everyone! I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way. My name's Chris. I used to be a night officer in a small town called Maple Hill. Not much happens here, maybe a lost dog, a late-night argument, or a teenager out past curfew. It's quiet. Peaceful. Or, it used to be. This story happened 3 years ago. I still think about it. Especially on cold nights. It was late October. The air was sharp, and the trees were nearly bare. You could smell wood smoke in the distance, and the wind made the streetlights sway ever so slightly. I remember that night because it started like any other. Calm. Still. But I hadn't reached Pine Street yet. Pine Street sits at the edge of town. Only 4 houses are occupied. The others are empty, old, boarded up, left to rot. There's one house, number 47, that we always joked about at the station. The kids called it the flicker house because the porch light would turn on and off at random, even though no one had lived there for over a decade. That night, as I turned onto Pine Street in my patrol car, I noticed something strange. The porch light at 47 wasn't flickering. It was glowing steady. Bright. I slowed down. Something about it felt wrong. The windows were dark. No sign of movement. But the porch light stayed on, humming softly in the fog. I parked the car and stepped out. My boots crunched against dry leaves. The cold bit through my jacket. I stood at the sidewalk, staring up at the house. My flashlight flickered even though I had just changed the batteries that morning. I didn't walk closer. I don't know why. I just stood there. Then the porch light shut off. Just like that. Gone. I waited. Nothing. I shook my head, tried to laugh it off, and turned back toward my car. But then something made me stop. Footsteps. Soft. Dragging. Behind me. I turned around fast, hand on my flashlight. No one was there. The street was empty. But now, the porch light was back on. And something else, this time, there was a shape in the upstairs window. A figure. Still. Watching. I called it in, but the radio buzzed with static. Not dead. Just muddy. I could barely hear dispatch. I tried again. Dispatch, this is Officer Maynard. I've got movement at 47 Pine Street. Requesting backup. More static. Then, clear as day, I heard something else come through. It was a voice. But not dispatch. A whisper, he's not alone. I dropped the radio. Every hair on my body stood up. I don't scare easily. But this felt different. I decided to go in. The gate creaked loud as I pushed it open. The porch steps groaned under my weight. I knocked on the door, half expecting someone to answer. Of course, no one did. Still, the door was unlocked. The air inside was colder than outside. Smelled like old wood and wet paper. I stepped in slowly, flashlight in hand. The furniture was still there. Covered in white sheets. Like the house had been waiting for someone to return. Or never left at all. Upstairs, I heard the floorboards creak. I froze. It wasn't the wind. It was too slow. Too heavy. I called out, "Hello? This is Officer Maynard. If anyone's inside, identify yourself." Silence. I made my way to the stairs. Each step moaned. Halfway up, I heard it again, the same dragging footsteps. But now, they were behind me, at the bottom of the stairs. I spun around. Empty. I was alone. Or, I wasn't. At the top of the stairs, there was a hallway with 3 doors. One at the far end was slightly open. A pale light spilled out. I walked toward it. The door opened wider on its own. Inside was a child's bedroom. Pink walls. Old toys. A cracked lamp flickering near a dusty bed. There was something sitting in the corner. Small. Hunched over. It looked like a child. "Hey," I said softly, "are you okay? Do you need help?" It didn't move. I stepped closer. The thing turned. It wasn't a child. It had the shape, yes, but the face was wrong. Hollow eyes. A smile that didn't move. Too many teeth. And no sound. The lamp exploded. Darkness swallowed the room. I backed away fast, heart racing. I could feel something behind me, breathing on my neck. I didn't turn around. I ran. Down the stairs, through the hall, out the front door. The porch light shut off behind me. The gate slammed closed on its own. I didn't stop running until I got to the car. I called dispatch again. This time, the signal was clear. But when backup came 20 minutes later, the house was dark. Locked. Empty. We searched it top to bottom. Nothing. Except in the upstairs bedroom, on the dusty floor, were 2 small handprints. And a word, scratched into the wood. Stay. They told me it was just stress. Lack of sleep. Imagination. But I know what I saw. That was my last shift in Maple Hill. I moved 2 towns over. Took a desk job. Sometimes I still drive past Pine Street. The house is still there. The porch light still flickers. And sometimes it glows steady. Like it's waiting. What do you think it was? Have you ever seen something that didn't want to be seen? Elder Lane was quiet, the kind of street where everyone waved but rarely talked. Tucked behind a forest line in a small town in northern Vermont, it felt safe. Still. But something had always felt a little off about the third house from the end. My name's Chris. I moved back here after my dad passed. I'd been gone for a while, trying to outrun some mistakes. I thought this town might help me reset. It was March. Cold winds blew through bare trees, and snow still clung to the edges of the sidewalks. The house I rented had peeling white paint and a broken porch light that flickered whenever the wind picked up. I didn't fix it. Didn't have the energy. I worked part-time as a night dispatcher for the local sheriff's office. It kept me busy enough to stay distracted. That streetlight across from my house right at the edge of the forest never worked. Just one tall metal pole, rusted near the bottom, with a dead bulb. It bothered me more than I expected. Every night, that patch of road was darker than the rest. Like it had swallowed the light. One night, I got off a late shift. It was after 2 a.m. The sky was clear, but the cold made my lungs ache. As I parked, I saw it, the light was on. The street light that never worked was glowing a soft, pale yellow. It buzzed gently, like an old fridge. I stopped and stared. Then I laughed. Maybe the town finally fixed it. But deep down, something didn't feel right. That night, I couldn't sleep. My bedroom faced the street, and even with the blinds shut, I could still feel that glow. I got up and peeked. There was someone standing under it. They weren't moving. Just standing, arms by their side, staring straight ahead. They were tall. Maybe 6 feet or more. Could have been a neighbor. But no one lived on that end of the street. Just the woods. I watched for a while. They didn't budge. After a few minutes, I closed the blinds and told myself it was nothing. Just someone passing through. But when I looked again, they were still there. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, the light was off again. No one under it. I called the town's utility office. The woman on the phone said the bulb hadn't been changed in over a year. Still flagged as broken. I didn't push it. I just nodded and thanked her. The next few nights were quiet. No glowing light. No figure. But on Sunday night, it came back. Same glow. Same buzz. Same figure. This time, they moved. Slowly, they turned their head, and I swear they looked straight at me through the blinds. I stepped back. My heart was pounding. I didn't turn on any lights. I just stood there in the dark, barely breathing. After a long while, I peeked again. They were gone. But the light? Still on. I didn't sleep at all. On Monday, I talked to Officer Maddox. He'd been in town for decades. I told him about the light. The figure. The feeling. He didn't laugh. He just looked down, then said, "Don't look at it. That light's not for you." That was all he said. That night, I left all the lights in my house off. I didn't peek. I didn't open the blinds. But I could hear it. That soft electric hum. And once, just once, I heard footsteps on the porch. They didn't knock. They didn't try the door. Just stood there. The next morning, I found a smear on the glass of my front window. Like someone had pressed their face against it. But it wasn't oily like a normal smudge. It was ash gray. Dry. Like dust from a chimney. I started sleeping in the back room after that. A few days later, Maddox came by my place. He looked tired. Said he had something for me. It was an old photo. Black and white. Looked like it was taken in the 60s. In it, there was a group of kids standing under that same streetlight. Except it was working. Bright. Clear. But in the corner of the photo, there was someone else. A tall, dark shape. Not quite touching the ground. They used to say if you see the light turn on, it's already too late, he said. He left me with that. That night, I tried something different. I sat in the living room with all the lights off. Waited. Around 2:13 a.m., the light turned on. Buzz. Then, footsteps outside. I didn't move. The steps stopped at my front door. A few seconds passed. Then came a whisper. Just one word, like a breath through the mail slot, "Chris." That was enough. The next morning, I packed my things and left. Didn't even break the lease. Just drove west. I don't tell this story often. People laugh or look uncomfortable. But I know what I saw. And I know what I heard. That streetlight still flickers sometimes. A friend of mine still lives on Elder Lane. He told me just last week, it came on again. I grew up in Willow Bend, a quiet little town in upstate New York. Nothing really happened there. Folks waved when they passed you. The corner diner still had booths with duct tape on the seats. And at night, the only sounds were crickets and the occasional dog barking in someone's yard. I moved back last year after my divorce. I needed space. Time. Somewhere to breathe without noise. My uncle left me his old house on Marlow Street. 2 stories, chipped white paint, a creaky porch. The kind of house that looked peaceful in the day, but changed once the sun went down. I didn't notice it at first. The light. It was one of those tall streetlights, right at the edge of my property. Faded pole, big round bulb. At night, it would flicker. Just once or twice. Nothing serious. I figured it was just old. But then it started staying on longer. I'd go outside for a smoke, and the light would be glowing steadily, even when the rest of the street was pitch black. Just that one light. Always that one. One night, I was sitting on the front porch, watching the fog roll in off the woods. It was cold. That kind of damp cold that sinks into your skin. I had a blanket wrapped around me and Max, my golden retriever, was curled up at my feet. That's when I saw her. Just for a second. A girl. Maybe 10 or 11. Standing beneath the streetlight. Pale skin. Long dark hair. She wore this old-fashioned white dress that didn't belong in this decade. She didn't move. She didn't wave. She just stood there, looking at my house. By the time I blinked, she was gone. I told myself I imagined it. I'd been tired. Maybe I nodded off. But Max had seen her too. He'd lifted his head, ears up, tail still. Like he was trying to place a scent that wasn't there anymore. The next night, I kept watch. I turned off all the lights, sat on the porch, and waited. 1:14 a.m. That's when the light turned on again. No one was outside. No cars. No sound. Then, faintly, I heard a voice. Come outside. It wasn't a scream. It was soft. Almost like a whisper tucked into the wind. My spine stiffened. Max growled, a deep, low rumble that made me grip the armrest. I scanned the street. Nothing. But when I looked back at the light, she was there again. Same girl. Same dress. This time, she was closer to the house. I didn't sleep that night. I tried asking neighbors the next morning. Most of them had lived on this street for years. One old man just stared at me when I brought it up. Finally, he muttered, that light should have been gone years ago. They took down the rest. I asked why it was still there. He shook his head and said, it always comes back. Nobody touches it. A few nights later, things got worse. The power in my house kept cutting out. My phone would turn off on its own. Every time I looked outside, the light on Marlowe Street was glowing. Sometimes brighter than it should. Too bright. Like it was staring straight through my window. And then came the scratching. It started in the attic. Slow. Like fingers brushing across the floorboards. Then it moved down the stairs, to the hallway, and finally, to my bedroom door. Max barked, but wouldn't get close. He stood at the end of the hall, tail between his legs. I opened the door fast, hoping to catch whatever it was. No one was there. But my bedroom window was open. The next morning, I found footprints in the frost on the grass. Small. Bare feet. Leading from the streetlight to my house. I finally called Officer Blake, someone I went to high school with. He agreed to stop by that night and sit with me. It was quiet for hours. No scratching. No whispers. No flickering. Then, around 2:30 a.m., the power died again. And the streetlight turned on. She was there. Officer Blake stood up slowly. Stay inside, he told me. He stepped out with his flashlight and walked toward the light. I watched from the window. The light got brighter. Brighter than I'd ever seen it. And then it went out. Complete darkness. I ran outside with my phone light. But Blake was gone. No footprints. No sound. Just cold air and an empty street. We found his cruiser the next day, parked at the end of the street. Engine still warm. Radio still on. Blake was never found. I moved out 3 days later. Sometimes I drive past Marlowe Street. I don't get out. I don't stop. But that light? It's still there. Still flickering. Still glowing brighter than it should. And some nights, when the wind is just right, you can hear her whisper. Come outside. I used to work night patrol in a quiet town called Ash Creek, tucked deep in the woods of northern Pennsylvania. Just a few thousand people, some farms, one grocery store, and a lot of long, dark roads. It was the kind of place where nothing ever seemed to happen until it did. I started working nights after my wife passed. I couldn't sleep much anyway, and driving around alone felt easier than sitting in the house with all her things. Our porch light still came on every night at 7 p.m., even though no one was waiting for her anymore. It was a Thursday in late October. Cold wind rattled the trees, and yellow leaves skidded across the pavement like dry paper. I remember because I had the window cracked just an inch, and I could smell wood smoke on the air. I was taking a slow loop around the edge of town when I noticed something strange. There was a light in the woods. It flickered. Just once. Then it came back. Not a house light, not a car. More like a lantern swinging in someone's hand. There were no trails out there. Just trees, thorns, and old, forgotten foundations from a village that burned down over a century ago. I parked on the shoulder and stepped out. The air was sharp, and the only sound was the hum of my cruiser cooling behind me. I stood there a moment, waiting to see if the light would move again. It did. It blinked once, twice, and then held steady. Low, like it was only a foot or two above the ground. That was enough for me. I radioed in my location, standard protocol, and stepped off the road. The leaves were wet and soft beneath my boots. I moved slow. The light didn't move. It just waited. As I got closer, the smell changed. The wood smoke was gone. Now the air smelled like whetstone and burnt metal, like someone had lit fireworks in a basement. I called out, "Hello? Is someone out here?" No reply. The light vanished. I kept walking anyway. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I just didn't want to go home. About 20 feet in, I found something I wasn't ready for. There was an old well. Covered in moss, its stones crumbling. And beside it, a lantern. An old one. Rusted. Flickering even though no flame burned inside. I felt sick. Not dizzy. Just wrong. Like I had walked into a memory that didn't belong to me. Then I heard something. Breathing. It was right behind me. I turned fast, hand on my flashlight, but there was no one there. Just empty woods. But the breathing didn't stop. It got faster. Then I saw it. Something stood in the dark between the trees. Tall. Still. Shadowed. I couldn't see a face. But I swear its shape was moving without moving. Like it shimmered at the edges. I backed away, heart pounding. And the breathing? It was coming from inside the well now. I turned and ran. Branches scraped my arms. Mud pulled at my boots. The cruiser felt a mile away. I didn't stop until I slammed the door shut and locked it. When I looked back, the lantern was glowing again. And beside it, the tall thing was still there. Watching. I didn't go back. I didn't tell anyone that night. I drove my route. I wrote it off as a trick of the light or a hallucination from lack of sleep. But a few days later, I ran into an older woman named Mrs. Kepler, who lived on the edge of town. She had been in Ash Creek all her life. I don't know why I told her. I guess I just needed someone to say I wasn't crazy. Her face went pale when I mentioned the well. She told me a story. Back in the 1930s, before the fire, a man named Eli Sutter lived near that part of the woods. He was a trapper. Lived alone. One winter, he went missing. When they searched his cabin, they found his diary. In it, he wrote about a shadow in the woods. Something he said watched him sleep. Something that came from the well. She said the well had been sealed. Years ago. But people kept hearing things. Seeing flickers of light. The town eventually stopped talking about it. I never went back to that spot. But sometimes, even now, when I drive that road at night, I see the light between the trees. Flickering. Waiting. And on colder nights, when fog rolls across the road and leaves dance in the wind, I hear breathing that isn't mine. I still work the night shift. I still drive that loop. But I never stop anymore. Not near that bend. Not near that well. And I always keep my windows rolled up tight. Because I don't think that shadow is gone. I think it's waiting. Still watching. I live in a small town called Waverly Pines. Not many people know it exists. It's one of those places where the air smells like old leaves and wood smoke. A place where every house has a porch and every porch has a story. Mine does too. After my wife passed, I stayed in our house alone. It's an old two-story near the edge of town. A little worn, but still standing strong. We had dreams here. Now it's just me, the porch light, and the silence. That porch light means something in Waverly Pines. We keep them on for safety, but also out of respect. It's something we do, especially in the fall. The light lets folks know you're still around, still holding on. One cold October night, I noticed something strange. I was sipping tea, watching the fog settle on the road. My porch light was on, flickering a little. It always did that when it got cold. Across the street, the Granger house, empty for years, had a light on too. That light had been dead since 2017. I knew because I was the one who nailed the plywood across their door. Mr. Granger left one day and never came back. The house sat empty, like it was holding its breath. But now, that porch light was glowing. I stared at it for a long time. No cars had pulled up. No movers. No signs of life. Just the soft yellow bulb shining in the fog. I went back inside. Maybe someone had finally bought the place. Maybe. The next night, the light was off again. The night after that, it was on. And then I saw something worse. From my bedroom window, I had a clear view of the Granger porch. One night, just past midnight, I saw a figure standing under the light. Not moving. Just standing there, facing my house. It looked like a man, tall, wearing what seemed like a coat. But the fog was thick, and the glass was old. I rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, the porch was empty. I didn't sleep much after that. I didn't tell anyone. What would I even say? That the ghost of a neighbor came back and flicked on the light? People already saw me as the lonely guy who talked to his dead wife. The next night, the porch light turned off around 2 a.m. I watched it happen. No flicker, no fade. Just a clean click into darkness. I tried to convince myself it was a faulty timer, maybe some wiring left alive in that old house. I tried. But then the notes started showing up. Folded slips of paper, left on my porch chair. Just a few words on each. The first one said, "You left me in the dark." I thought it was a prank. Maybe kids from town messing around. But there were no footprints. No tire marks. Just the note, and a chill that crept through my bones. The next night, you turned off the light. I didn't sleep at all. I sat on my porch with a flashlight and a cup of coffee, waiting. Nothing. At dawn, another note was on the chair beside me. You locked the door. And that's when I remembered. Mr. Granger had asked for help all those years ago. He said he heard voices in the walls. He thought something was living in the house with him. I told him he was just tired, maybe drinking too much. But when he left town, he looked broken. He asked me to nail shut the doors and windows. And I did. I thought I was doing the right thing. Sealing the past. Now I wasn't so sure. I walked across the street that evening, flashlight in hand. The porch light was off. The boards were still nailed tight, but the air smelled like rotten soil. I don't know why I did it. Maybe guilt. Maybe fear. But I reached out and touched the doorknob. It was warm. I stepped back. Something moved inside. Not footsteps. Not voices. It was like breathing. Heavy, slow, wet breathing. I ran. I didn't care if the neighbors saw. I slammed my own door shut and turned every light on in the house. But none of them felt as safe as that porch light. So I sat outside again, wrapped in a blanket, waiting. That's when I saw it again. The figure. Back on the Granger porch. But this time, it wasn't facing me. It was walking toward the street. Slow, steady steps. It passed through the fog and crossed the road. I couldn't move. It stepped onto my lawn, still only lit by the flickering light overhead. And then it stopped just at the bottom of my porch steps. I couldn't see its face. Just the outline of something wrong. Like it didn't belong in this world. Too tall. Shoulders bent at an unnatural angle. Head tilted too far to the side. It lifted one hand and placed a new note on the porch. Then it turned around and vanished back into the fog. I waited until morning to read it. Turn the light off again, and I'll come inside. Since that day, I leave my porch light on. Always. Even when I go to bed. Even when I leave town. The bulb burns all night long. And I keep extra spares in a drawer near the door. I don't know what lives in the Granger house now. I just know that it's watching. Waiting. And it doesn't like the dark. My name's Officer Ben Moore. I've lived in Cedar Hollow all my life. It's a small town tucked away in northern Vermont. Quiet place. You know your neighbors, and they know you. But something happened 2 winters ago that I still can't explain. Back then, I was working the night shift. Nothing exciting usually, just checking old barns, broken fences, and the occasional raccoon stuck in a trash can. But that night, it was different. It was early January. Snow had been falling steady all day. By 9 p.m., the town was quiet. Streets empty. Just the wind whistling between houses. Around midnight, I got a call from dispatch. A woman named Eleanor, who lived out on Timber Road, said she heard someone whistling near her backyard. She lived alone. Said it sounded too close. Too long. When I got there, her house looked peaceful. Lights on, chimney smoking. But she was clearly scared. He was out there, she said, pointing toward the woods behind her home. It wasn't just a whistle. It was repeating. I asked if she saw anything. She shook her head. No. But it felt like he was watching me. I offered to check it out, even though part of me figured it was just wind through the trees. But as I stepped into the backyard, the air changed. You ever feel something just shift? Like walking into a room after a fight? It was cold. Bitter cold. And still. No sound. No birds. No wind. No cars. Then, the whistle. It came from deep in the trees. A slow, drawn-out tune. Almost like an old lullaby. 4 notes. Over and over. I froze. It didn't sound like wind. I called out, "This is Officer Moore. Is anyone out there?" Silence. Then the whistle again. Closer this time. I pulled out my flashlight and stepped into the woods. The snow crunched under my boots. I followed the sound, careful not to trip over roots hidden under the snow. After maybe 10 minutes, I saw something. A figure standing by an old pine. It looked like a man. Tall, thin. Wearing what looked like a long coat. I lifted my light, called again, "Sir, I need you to come toward me." He didn't move. But the whistling continued, and I realized something terrifying. His mouth wasn't moving. The sound was coming, but he wasn't doing it. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back. That's when he turned and walked deeper into the woods. No sound. Just vanished behind the trees. I should have followed, I guess. But something in me said no. Not tonight. I backed away slowly, returned to Eleanor's place, and told her I'd patrol the area more the next night. But I couldn't sleep when I got home. The sound, it stuck in my head. That slow, looping whistle. I kept thinking about how still he stood. And how he moved without sound. The next day, I looked into the town archives. Found something odd. 35 years ago, a boy went missing from that same stretch of woods. His name was Daniel. 8 years old. Loved to whistle. They never found his body. Locals said his mom, Martha, went crazy with grief. Started walking the woods, calling his name. Some folks said she could hear him whistling. Even years later. They called it a story. A sad one. But not dangerous. That night, I went back to Timber Road. I parked my cruiser a little farther up and walked the trail behind Eleanor's house. It was snowing again. Thick flakes, quiet air. After half an hour, I heard it. The same whistle. But now it echoed from 2 different directions. I stopped in the middle of the trail. My flashlight flickered twice and then went out completely. I was alone in the dark. The whistle was closer now. I turned in a slow circle, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Then, I heard a third whistle. Behind me. I spun around and saw prints in the snow, barefoot prints. Small ones. Like a child's. They ended at a tree. I walked over, but the footprints just stopped. No sign of a body. No broken branches. Just empty air above packed snow. I radioed it in, but there was static. Nothing got through. That's when I heard a fourth whistle, low and shaky, right beside me. But when I turned, no one was there. I don't know how I made it out. I ran until I saw my cruiser, slammed the door shut, and didn't stop shaking until sunrise. I filed the report, but it got buried. Nobody pushed it. No evidence. No suspect. Just a cold night and a strange sound. I never saw the man again. Or the boy. But I still hear the whistle sometimes. Only now, it comes from behind my house. And my son, who's 10 now, says he hears it too. He says a man comes to the woods and just watches. I've locked all our windows. We don't go out after dark anymore. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had followed that figure into the woods. Would I have vanished, too? I don't have answers. But I can tell you this. If you ever hear whistling outside your window, especially on a snowy night, don't look. Just don't. What do you think happened in those woods? Have you ever heard something that felt wrong? It was late October in Hollow Creek, a small town nestled between forests and forgotten train tracks. The air was cold, and the smell of damp leaves filled the streets. The kind that stick to your boots and never really dry out. Chris had lived there all his life. He worked the night shift as a dispatcher for the sheriff's office. The kind of job where nothing usually happens, until something does. Ever since his wife passed last spring, the nights had gotten longer. He stayed in the office, mostly alone, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the red blinking light on the landline. He wasn't ready to go home. Not to that silence. Not yet. One Thursday evening, around 11:20 p.m., the phone rang. The voice on the other end was shaky. "There's someone looking in my window," the woman said. "He's just standing there." Chris typed her address. Birch Street. Close by. An old part of town with big porches and creaky floorboards. The caller's name was Amy. Young. Lived alone. He asked her to stay on the line. She said the figure had walked away when the porch light flickered. No car. No footsteps. Just gone. Chris called it in, but there weren't any units free. A Halloween fair had brought in some troublemakers from the next county, and all the deputies were dealing with fights and drunks. He grabbed his jacket and decided to check it out himself. When Chris got to Amy's place, everything looked normal. Quiet. Cold wind shook the branches, and the porch swing moved just a little too much. He knocked. Amy opened the door with wide, nervous eyes. "He was standing right there," she said, pointing to the living room window. "Just looking in. Like he was waiting for something." Chris walked around the house with his flashlight. Nothing. No footprints in the muddy flower bed. No tire marks on the gravel road. He told her it was probably a prank. But as he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Across the street, in the house that had been empty for years, a curtain moved. Chris paused. The old Wilkerson house had been abandoned since the fire 5 years ago. Blackened bricks. Boarded windows. No lights. No utilities. He stared a moment longer, then walked back to his car. That night, back at the office, Chris pulled up old reports. Fires. Trespassing. Local legends. The Wilkerson place always came up in whispers. Kids dared each other to run across the porch. But there had never been real trouble there. Just stories. Still, something about the curtain stayed in his mind. The next night, he drove by after his shift. Just to check. The porch was covered in leaves. The boards groaned under his boots. When he looked through the slats of the boarded window, it was dark inside, except for one thing. A candle. Flickering. And next to it, he could have sworn, stood a figure. Still. Tall. Facing the window. Chris stepped back, heart racing. He told himself it was a trick of the light. Maybe kids broke in and were playing games. He didn't tell anyone. But the next week, the calls started coming in again. Different streets. Different houses. Same thing. A man. Watching from the window. Always silent. Always still. By the time anyone looked twice, he was gone. Chris knew the pattern. It was always near the old house. Like it was the center of something. One night, unable to sleep, he returned to the Wilkerson house. No flashlight. Just moonlight and his old revolver. He stepped through the door, half off its hinges, and walked into the darkness. The air smelled like old smoke and wet wood. The candle from before was still there. Burned halfway down. On the wall behind it, drawings. Dozens of them. Childlike scribbles in black crayon. Windows. Over and over. Windows with eyes behind them. And in every drawing, one figure stood apart. Tall. Black. Faceless. Chris took one step closer and heard it. Breathing. Not his own. From upstairs. He turned and left. Fast. He didn't run. But his heart did. After that night, the drawings began to appear elsewhere. On his car window. On his front door. Even on the mirror in the station bathroom. Always the windows. Always the eyes. He started to think it wasn't a person at all. It was something that lived in the spaces we forgot. Empty homes. Dark roads. Abandoned places that once meant something but had been left behind. It didn't knock. It didn't speak. It just watched. And now, it had seen him too. Chris transferred to another town 3 months later. He never spoke about it again. But some nights, in his new apartment, he wakes up cold. And finds the curtain just slightly open. Like something had been looking in. Then leaving again. Just before he noticed. I grew up in a quiet town called Grayson Hollow. It's one of those places with more trees than people, where everyone knows your name and the gas station still has a payphone out front. After my dad passed, I moved back to help my mom out. She never wanted to leave that old house, even after his stroke. The place creaks in the wind and smells like cedar and old newspapers. I work part-time with the town's maintenance crew and help at the fire station when needed. Life is simple here. It was late October when it happened. A few days before Halloween. The air had that crisp bite to it, and the fog rolled in thick at night. You couldn't see past your front porch. The kind of fog that made you feel like something was watching. That night, I was alone. Mom was visiting her sister in Ohio. I'd just finished fixing a broken window in the shed and was heading inside when I noticed something strange. The streetlight outside the house kept flickering. It would buzz, then go dark, then buzz again and light up. I figured it was just the bulb going out. But the third time it blinked off, I saw someone standing under it. A woman. She wore a long coat. Her hair was soaked and hanging in front of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing there. Her shape barely visible in the fog. I stared for a while, trying to figure out if it was a neighbor or someone who needed help. I called out. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" No answer. She didn't move. Something in my chest tightened. I felt that old fear creep in, like when I was a kid and used to imagine monsters outside my window. I blinked, and when I looked again, she was gone. I stepped off the porch, heart racing, and walked toward the streetlight. Nothing. No footprints. No sound. Just fog and silence. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day, I asked around. No one else saw her. The sheriff said it was probably a traveler passing through, maybe confused by the fog. But something about her felt wrong. That evening, the fog came back even thicker. I kept the porch light on and locked every door. Around midnight, I was sitting in the kitchen when I heard footsteps on the gravel path outside. Slow. Crunching. Then silence. I peeked through the blinds. She was back. Same spot under the flickering streetlight. Still soaking wet. Still staring, except this time, she was facing my house. Her head tilted slightly, like she was listening. I didn't go outside. I didn't call out. I just watched. After a few minutes, the light flickered once more, and she was gone again. I started losing sleep. I kept hearing things. Soft knocks on the windows. My phone vibrating with no calls. The back door creaking open even though I'd locked it twice. I checked the camera above the porch. One night, around 3:12 a.m., the sensor picked up movement. The video was grainy, but it clearly showed the woman walking up the steps and standing there. She never knocked. Never tried to come in. Just stood there. Watching. The clip cut out after 17 seconds. I showed it to Sheriff Klein. He watched in silence and said it was probably a glitch. Fog messes with electronics, he said. But I knew better. The next night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed in the living room with the lights on, clutching a flashlight. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again. The porch steps. Slow. Creak, creak, creak. I turned off the lamp and sat still. My heart thudded so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked toward the front door. She was standing just outside the glass. Not knocking. Not moving. But this time, I saw her face. Her skin was pale, almost blue. Her eyes were sunken, dark. Her mouth was slightly open like she was whispering something. Her breath fogged the glass, and then, she turned and walked into the mist. I don't know why, but I opened the door and stepped out. The cold hit me like a wave. The yard was empty. But in the distance, I saw her outline, standing near the trees. She turned again and vanished into the fog. The next morning, I packed up and stayed with a friend across town. I've never seen her since. I checked old town records later, just out of curiosity. Turns out, back in the 80s, a woman went missing near my street. She'd been walking home from the store during a bad storm. They found her car, but never found her. People said the fog had swallowed her up. Some say she still wanders, trying to get home. Maybe that's what I saw. Maybe not. I haven't told my mom. She loves that house and wouldn't want to leave. But every time I visit now, I keep the lights on all night. And I don't sit near the front windows anymore. I live in a quiet town called Cedar Hollow. It's small. The kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and wave at strangers. But something happened here 2 winters ago. And I haven't slept right since. My name is Tom. I work as a night shift officer with the local sheriff's department. Most nights are slowed stray dogs, arguments between neighbors, the occasional deer accident on Route 6. But that night was different. It was just past 1 a.m. A light snow had started to fall. The roads were empty. I was driving my usual patrol route down Ash Pine Road when I noticed a streetlight flickering up ahead. It was the old kind, yellow-orange glow, buzzing like a flytrap. We've been meaning to replace them. Under the light, I saw her. She looked about 11. Wearing a white dress. No jacket. No shoes. Just standing there in the snow, staring at the road. I pulled over immediately. I got out and called, "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay?" She didn't move. Didn't even flinch. I walked closer, trying not to startle her. "It's cold out here. You shouldn't be alone." Still no answer. When I got about 10 feet away, she slowly turned her head. Her eyes were dark. Not just from the shadows, something about them felt hollow, empty, like staring into a well that never ends. "Are you lost?" I asked. She blinked once. Then slowly raised her arm and pointed, not at me, but toward the woods behind the streetlight. "Is someone out there?" I asked. She nodded. I turned to look. The woods were thick. Quiet. I radioed for backup and stepped off the road, my boots crunching in the snow. I walked in maybe 20 feet, flashlight swinging from tree to tree. Nothing. I called out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Only silence. When I turned back, she was gone. Vanished. No footprints. No drag marks. Just an empty road and the broken light flickering above. I searched the woods again. Nothing. Backup arrived 10 minutes later. I explained what happened. They helped me look. No girl. No tracks. No houses nearby. Just cold air and quiet trees. That should have been the end of it. But over the next few nights, other drivers, locals, started calling the station. They all reported the same thing, a little girl standing under that same streetlight, not moving, just pointing toward the woods. Each time an officer responded, the girl was gone. The town got nervous. Parents kept their kids home after sunset. People started putting up extra locks. But the sightings continued. Then one night, something worse happened. A teenage boy named Riley went missing. He'd been out with friends and decided to walk home alone. His last message to his mom was a text that said, "There's a girl out here." They found his phone near the streetlight. It had snow on it, like it had been there for hours. But the screen was still glowing when they picked it up. We searched the woods for 2 days. No sign of Riley. Just silence, trees, and something none of us said out loud to dread. I started looking into the town's history. Cedar Hollow is old. Founded in the late 1800s. I checked old news records and found something chilling. In 1953, a girl named Clara Whitmore went missing during a snowstorm. She was 11 years old. Last seen walking home from school. Her body was never found, but her white dress was discovered hanging from a tree off Ash Pine Road. That streetlight? It was installed the year after she disappeared. To help people feel safer. It didn't help. I kept the file on my desk. Couldn't stop thinking about it. Clara. The girl with no jacket. The girl pointing at something none of us could see. One night, I decided to go back alone. No radio. No backup. I parked near the streetlight and waited. Just me and the cold. Around 1:17 a.m., the light started flickering again. And then, like clockwork, she appeared. Same dress. Same empty stare. I stayed in my car and watched. She didn't move at first. Then, slowly, she raised her hand and pointed toward the woods again. But this time, she smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was small. Strange. Like she knew something I didn't. Like she wanted me to follow. I stepped out of the car. The air felt thicker. Heavier. My breath came out in little clouds. I took one step forward. Then another. The woods waited. But I didn't go in. I couldn't. Something in my gut told me not to. Like if I took one more step, I'd never come back out. So I stood there. Watching her. She lowered her arm and tilted her head, almost like she was disappointed. And then, she vanished. Just like before. No footprints. No signs. No sound. Only the wind in the trees. I haven't seen her since. But the streetlight still flickers. Every night. People still report strange noises on that stretch of road. Some say they hear a child crying. Others say they've seen shadows moving between the trees. Riley was never found. Some nights, I still drive down Ash Pine Road. I park near the light and just sit there, staring into the woods. I don't know what Clara wants. I don't know why she points. But I know this, whatever's out there, it's not done yet. And if you ever find yourself driving through Cedar Hollow on a snowy night, and you see a little girl in white standing under a flickering streetlight, don't stop. Don't speak. Just keep driving. Because once you see her, she remembers you. I moved back to Pine Hollow last fall. It's a small town in Oregon, the kind where folks still wave when they pass by. I had just gone through a tough divorce. The silence of my childhood home felt better than the noise in my head. The house sits near the edge of Crooked Hill. Its old, creaky wood floors, dusty corners, and windows that rattle when the wind picks up. I didn't mind. It was mine. Familiar. Safe. The nights were cold in late October. Fog rolled in heavy most evenings, and the streetlight across from my porch would flicker as if it were shivering too. I'd sit on the front steps with a blanket and a mug of tea, watching that light go in and out. It always came back on. Until one night, it didn't. That night, I was feeling especially anxious. I had just gotten off a call with my ex-wife, and it didn't go well. My hands were shaking. I stepped outside to get some air and sat down, like always. The light across the street stayed off. Just black. The fog was thicker than usual. I could barely see the neighbor's mailbox. I sipped my tea, trying to calm down, when I thought I saw someone standing where the light used to shine. At first, I figured it was my eyes playing tricks on me. But the shape didn't move. It just stood there. like it was watching. I blinked hard. It was gone. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, I called the city. They said they'd send someone out to check the light in a few days. I didn't mention what I thought I saw. That evening, I tried to ignore the dark space across the road. But as soon as I stepped onto the porch, my body tensed. There it was again. A tall figure. Thin. Unmoving. I stared at it for a while. Then it moved. Not toward me. Just a tilt of the head. Like it was listening. Hello? I called out. It didn't respond. Just kept watching. I backed into the house and locked the door. That night, strange things started happening. My phone rang twice with no number. When I answered, there was silence. No static. Just complete quiet. At 3:13 a.m., I woke up gasping. It felt like someone had been whispering in my ear. My window was open, even though I hadn't touched it. I got up and closed it. The streetlight was still out. But the figure was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I started asking around. My neighbor, Mr. Caldwell, has lived here since the 60s. I asked him if he'd ever had issues with the streetlight. He didn't look surprised. Just said, that light goes out every few years. Always around Halloween. Ever notice anything strange when it does? I asked. He looked me dead in the eye. Don't go out after midnight. That's all I'll say. Halloween night came. I didn't plan to do anything. No trick-or-treaters came this far down the road. I turned off all the lights and tried to sleep early. But something woke me. Knocking. Not at the front door, at the window next to my bed. 3 soft knocks. I sat up in the dark, heart pounding. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another knock. Slower this time. Almost gentle. I reached for my phone. No signal. Just a blinking red bar where the signal should be. I finally got the courage to pull back the curtain. Nothing. But when I turned around, my bedroom door was open. I always close it. I walked through the house, heart racing, checking every lock. All closed. All secure. But my front porch light had blown out, and the street light was still dead. I didn't go outside. The next day, I found muddy footprints on the wooden porch. Just one set. Bare feet. Too long. Almost like they were stretched. They led up to the window and then back down to the road. I called the sheriff's office. Deputy Lauren came by. She was kind and didn't act like I was crazy. Took a few photos. Promised to keep an extra patrol nearby. Before she left, she said, "You're not the first one on this hill to see something. My uncle grew up near here. Said there's a story about a man who lost his mind and wandered into the fog. They say when the light goes out, he tries to find his way home." That night, I sat on the porch again. The streetlight flickered once. Then went dark. And from the edge of the fog, I heard a whisper. It said my name. I haven't sat outside since. The city replaced the bulb 2 weeks ago. It flickers every now and then, but it stays on. Still, some nights, I think I see a shadow just past the light. Standing perfectly still. Watching. And every Halloween now, I leave town. I lock the house and drive away. Because I know whatever it is, it remembers me. And it knows my name. Hey everyone. I put a lot of effort and heart into creating these videos just for you. If you're enjoying the content, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a quick comment below and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Your support means the world to me, and it keeps me motivated to bring more awesome videos your way.